Committee is holding its sixth nomination hearing of the 117th Congress as we continue to process the Biden administration's nominees. We have before the committee this morning 6 nominees. Welcome to all. Tiffany Cunningham, nominated to the Federal Circuit, will be on the first panel, and then the second panel includes Margaret Strickland, nominated to the U.S. District Court for the District of New Mexico, David Chipman, nominated to be Director of Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, known as ATF, Ur Jaddou, nominated to head the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, Ann Milgram, nominated to be the Administrator of DEA, our Drug Enforcement Administration, Ken Polite, nominated to be the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division. Before I introduce 2 of these nominees, I want to say a word about the nominations process. I want to thank the White House for sending us nominees with extraordinary experience and credentials for the positions to which they've been nominated. And I want to make sure that we understand we need to do our part here in the Judiciary Committee and in the United States Senate to make sure that we have Senate-confirmed leaders in the executive branch. Many of the positions that are being aspiring to be filled today by these nominees have been vacant for long periods of time. For example, former President Trump never nominated an administrator for the Drug Enforcement Administration. There hasn't been a Senate-confirmed head of that agency in 6 years, since 2015. The confirmation process not only serves to gauge a nominee's qualifications, but it's an important challenge to the Senate and to this committee to do their job. The prior administration relied heavily on acting officials, took the Senate out of the process. This administration is trying to bring the Senate back into its constitutional role. Turning to the nominees, I want to first introduce Tiffany Cunningham, nominated to the Federal Circuit. Ms. Cunningham was born in Detroit, Michigan. She spent almost 20 years in Chicago. I'm proud to call her a fellow Illinoisan. Her credentials are extraordinary. Undergraduate degree in chemical engineering from MIT, law degree from Harvard Law School, clerkship on the Federal Circuit. Ms. Cunningham has spent almost 2 decades as an intellectual property litigator and has worked on every aspect of patent litigation from the inception of the case through discovery, trial, and appeal. Further, she has represented clients from any number of fields: mechanical engineering, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, computer science, and the auto industry. Her clients include Fortune 500 and other high-tech companies. Given her experience representing both plaintiffs and defendants, she understands the importance of the law being applied even-handedly. Ms. Cunningham will be ready from day one to serve on the bench. She has technical expertise, deep knowledge of patent law, and almost 20 years of experience as a litigator. Finally, I would note that when confirmed, Ms. Cunningham will be the first Black judge to serve on the Federal Circuit. This historic nominee will bring both professional and racial diversity to the court. I also have the privilege of introducing David Chipman, nominated to be the director of the ATF. Mr. Chipman, 25-year law enforcement veteran. After beginning his career as a special agent with the General Services Administration's OIG, Mr. Chipman joined ATF in 1988 when it was still part of the Treasury Department. He served as a special agent with multiple field offices in many locations, including Virginia, Texas, and Michigan, and led a number of components of the ATF in Washington, including the Firearms Enforcement Branch and the Policy Development and Evaluation Branch. While at ATF, Mr. Chipman led or assisted in multiple efforts to combat gun trafficking and the proliferation of gun violence. He also worked tirelessly to bring more attention to the health, safety, and wellness of law enforcement officials nationwide. Since leaving ATF, Mr. Chipman has continued his work advancing bipartisan common sense measures to protect responsible gun ownership while reducing the use of firearms against law enforcement officers and innocent individuals. Mr. Chipman has quite literally been on the front lines in the fight against gun violence. As a gun owner himself and an advocate for principled constitutional gun safety measures, Mr. Chipman is singularly positioned to lead ATF and tackle the gun violence epidemic facing our nation. It's worth noting as well that Mr. Chipman will be only the second confirmed ATF director in the agency's history I want to repeat that. He would be the second confirmed ATF director in the agency's history, and the first director to ever have served as an ATF special agent. His knowledge of the agency and its purview is unparalleled. In my estimation, he has what it takes: acumen, leadership experience, and commitment to lead the ATF. With that, I turn to my friend and ranking member, Chuck Grassley.
You don't have to answer this now, Mr. Chairman, but I would think that science ought to be advanced enough to show us on this virus that we don't have to have this spacing that we have now. Would you check that out for me?
If you want to sit closer to me, I'll arrange that.
Well, I do, yes, yes. But I think we ought to get to the point where we have some more. I'd like to be able to actually see our witnesses. So maybe think about it. Okay, thank you. Today we're here for 6 nominees, 1 for the circuit, 1 for the district, and 4 executive nominees. The nominee for the federal circuit, Tiffany Cunningham, seems very well qualified. The federal circuit is a specialty court that hears mostly patent cases. It does also hear some other appeals as well, including federal taking, and so I'm going to have some questions for Ms. Cunningham on that subject. The district nominee, Margaret Strickland, is another of President Biden's criminal defense judges. This is the 4th criminal defense judge that we've considered. I want to be very clear that there's nothing wrong with being a criminal defense attorney. Some of President Trump's excellent judges, like Paul Matty of the 3rd Circuit, Raj Singhal of Florida, and Clifton Corker of Tennessee, were criminal defense attorneys. They were out to protect their clients' constitutional rights, all of them. Like I said before, there's nothing wrong with the position that an organization that demands justice takes, but we ought to have equal consideration for thoughts given by that organization compared to some things that were said about judges that came with federalist backing. Groups like Demand Justice have made it clear that's not what they want. They seem to think that these criminal defense judges will defend the police from the bench. I think we should try to find out what kind of criminal defense judges we're getting, a Bill of Rights judge or a Demand Justice judge. We also have some executive nominees, former Attorney General Milgram and Mr. Polite seem to have relatively broad support. Mr. Polite, in particular, has received strong letters of support from Republicans like Brian Benskowski and Alice Fisher, who aren't the usual suspects supporting Democrat nominees. That's pretty impressive. I have concerns regarding Ms. Jaddou, a nominee to be director of USCIS. During her time as chief counsel for that organization, that agency, during the last several years of the Obama administration, the agency created various parole programs that are not consistent with the language or the intent of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Should she be confirmed, I have concerns about her willingness to further stretch the limits of parole authority, and I hope to get some clarification in her views during today's hearing, and I didn't get that clarification when I had a telephone conference with her. I'm also troubled by statements that she has made on other issues, such as the use of Title 42 expulsion authority at the southern border, funding for immigration enforcement agencies, and asylee law. I believe all of these issues are worthy of thorough questioning and examining before this committee. I regret that today's format hearing will hinder our ability to explore each of these topics, so I will probably have questions in writing on those issues. Lastly, we have Mr. Chapman. Ever since Mr. Chipman, ever since he was announced, I have been hearing from alarmed constituents who who care about their rights under the Second Amendment. Mr. Chipman seems to have worked for every prominent gun control group in the country. He's been described by CNN as, quote, a fierce advocate for gun control, end of quote. There isn't a liberal hobby horse on guns that he hasn't ridden, whether it's misleading the public about modern sports rifles, arguing against popular magazine sizes, or advocating for universal background checks. Of particular concern is the contempt with which he seems to view ordinary Americans who buy and carry firearms. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, I don't think I've pulled a trigger of a gun in the last 40 years. If I do, I don't remember when. So I'm not one of these guys that has an arsenal of guns on my farm or any place. So I just come from this from the standpoint of the Constitution. So in regard to Mr. Chipman, to pick just one example, he said last year, quote, if you keep gun, quote, if you keep the gun store open, there's a risk of first-time buyers who are largely buying out of fear and panic and untrained, end of quote. ATF is a significant law enforcement agency. We mostly hear about it when it messes up, whether it's Waco, Operation Fast and Furious, or the Chicago Stash House scandals. But day to day, ATF plays a significant role in the legal trade of firearms in this country. Many see putting a committed gun control proponent like Mr. Chipman in charge of ATF is like putting a tobacco executive in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services, or Antifa in charge of the Portland Police Department. I hope he can alleviate those fears today as we question him. I yield.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. We have 4 or 5 members, Democrats and Republicans, who would like to say a word of introduction on behalf of one of the nominees. First, from the state of New Mexico, we have both senators. The senior senator, Senator Heinrich, is joining us remotely, I believe. He'll introduce Ms. Strickland. Floor is yours, Senator Heinrich.
Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, it's really my pleasure and honor this morning to introduce Margaret Strickland, the President's nominee to be a District Court Judge for the District Court of New Mexico. Ms. Strickland was born and raised in the Southwest border region where this District Court seat presides. She attended New Mexico State University and the University of Texas at El Paso before attending law school at New York University. Ms. Strickland returned to the Southwest after law school and started her career with the Las Cruces office of the New Mexico Public Defender, representing clients in the juvenile drug court and in felony defense work. In 2011, Ms. Strickland formed her own law firm, continuing her public service work representing indigent defendants in federal court. Ms. Strickland has litigated both criminal and civil cases, including a significant number in the federal district court located in Las Cruces, New Mexico. She's also appeared before the New Mexico Court of Appeals, the New Mexico Supreme Court, and the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and filed before the United States Supreme Court. Ms. Strickland served on the board of New Mexico criminal defense lawyers for over a decade, including as president. In 2018, the Federal District of New Mexico appointed her to represent all Criminal Justice Act lawyers as a panel representative. Ms. Strickland has also done significant volunteer work with programs that reduce the rate of euthanasia for companion animals. In fact, she and her husband, Greg, foster dogs and puppies so that they can be placed in a home rather than euthanized. If confirmed, Ms. Strickland will be faced with one of the busiest federal dockets in the country and inherit a heavy backload of cases. I am confident that her experience and her incredible work ethic will best position her to immediately get to work. Ms. Strickland is a highly qualified nominee with the right experience, the right temperament, and the right disposition to be a fair-minded district court judge. The ABA agrees with the majority giving her a well-qualified rating. She has spent her entire professional career working in the community in which she will sit. She knows intimately the impact the legal system has on everyday Americans, and she understands that serving as a judge is very different from serving as an advocate. She is ready and prepared for the shift from zealously and effectively representing clients to faithfully applying the law to the facts of a specific case. I also want to take a quick moment to recognize Ms. Strickland's husband, Greg, and their son, George, who I'm certain are so proud to celebrate this moment. I enthusiastically support Ms. Strickland's nomination for District Court Judge for the District of New Mexico, and I hope that all of the members of this committee will join me in supporting this highly qualified nominee. Thank you both.
Thanks, Senator Heinrich. Next, we have the junior senator from New Mexico, our new colleague, Senator Lujan.
Mr. Chair, it's my honor to be before the Judiciary Committee today to help introduce Margaret Strickland for consideration to serve on the U.S. District Court for the District of New Mexico in Las Cruces. Ms. Strickland, as my colleague Senator Heinrich shared, was born and raised in the Southwest and would bring significant legal experience and judicial experience to the District Court. Ms. Strickland has spent the last 15 years practicing law in New Mexico, including before the New Mexico Court of Appeals, New Mexico Supreme Court, and the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and the United States Supreme Court. As a former public defender, she would bring much needed professional diversity and perspective to our federal courts. Ms. Strickland has strong ties to the New Mexico legal community, including being elected by her peers to the Board of New Mexico Criminal Defense Lawyers, where she served for over a decade in different positions, including as president. In 2018, she was appointed by the Federal District of New Mexico to represent all Criminal Justice Act lawyers as the panel representative. With a proven record of service and leadership, I'm confident that Ms. Strickland will continue to serve all New Mexicans equitably on the district court once confirmed. She is a highly qualified nominee, and it's my honor to stand with her today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. Next, we have Senator Padilla to introduce Ms. Jaddou. I think he's going to join us shortly. In the meantime, I'll ask if Senator Menendez is available, also by remote, to offer one of the two introductions of Ms. Milgram, our DEA nominee. Senator Menendez, please proceed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, esteemed colleagues. Today, I'm pleased to join Senator Booker in introducing Ms. Ann Milgram, President Biden's nominee for Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Agency. Ms. Milgram's experience as a local, state, and federal prosecutor, a state attorney general, a philanthropy executive, and a respected voice on criminal justice reform make her an exceptional nominee. Ms. Milgram grew up in East Brunswick, New Jersey, was drawn to public service at a young age, serving as a congressional page. She went on to earn her BA from Rutgers College, a Master of Philosophy from the University of Cambridge, and a law degree from New York University. After clerking for U.S. District Court Judge Ann Thompson in Trenton, New Jersey, Ms. Milgram got her start in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In 2001, she joined the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division as Special Litigation Counsel for Human Trafficking. There, Ms. Milgram won several convictions under newly enacted human trafficking laws, an issue that is deeply intertwined with illicit drug trade. Then in 2007, after serving as counsel in his U.S. Senate office, New Jersey Governor John Corzine nominated her to serve as Attorney General. In this position, Ms. Milgram oversaw a criminal justice division with 21 prosecutors, 30,000 law enforcement officers across New Jersey, a managerial experience that leaves her well prepared to oversee the DEA's 9,000 employees. As Attorney General, Ms. Milgram led investigations into gang activity, organized crime, mortgage fraud, illegal trafficking, and more. She also pursued innovative, data-driven approaches to fighting crime in New Jersey, including a 2007 partnership with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to help New Jersey trace illegal firearms recovered at crime scenes. Yet Ms. Milgram is best known for her groundworking reform policing in the city of Camden, then known as the most violent city in America, using analytics and crime data to create a more responsive police force Within 1 year, she helped achieve a 40% reduction in violent crime in Camden. In 2011, she founded the Criminal Justice Initiative at the Laura and John Arnold Foundation to continue her focus on leveraging technology to advance criminal justice reform. There, she developed a public safety risk assessment tool to provide judges with more holistic decision-making information and help invest over $55 million in efforts across the country to prevent violent crime and create a more humane criminal justice system. Today, she is a professor of practice and distinguished scholar in residence at New York University School of Law, where she launched the Criminal Justice Lab. My colleague Ann Milgram is uniquely positioned to lead the DEA and advance the Biden administration's effort to combat the opioid epidemic, stop the flow of dangerous substances like fentanyl into our country, and build safer communities. In my view, the DEA can only benefit from her vast experience, her eye for innovation, and her reputation for excellence. I urge her swift confirmation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Menendez. Senator Booker, you're now recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, there are a privilege senators get to introduce someone from their state, but this is a deeper privilege that some of my colleagues have had, is I get to introduce somebody from my state who I have known for almost 30 years. About 29 years ago, I met Ann Milgram and by the way, I'm not under oath, so I will say 29 years ago, I was 21 and she was 5. And I met her when we were both finalists in New Jersey to go on go on to the final round to be Rhodes Scholar candidates. I have since got to know a lot of the people that interviewed us that day, and they made it clear to me that she was the outstanding standout of the duo that would go on to the final round. Ann made an impression on me on that day back in 1992 that I will never forget, and I tracked her career since then. It was 15 years ago that she and I both landed in important positions in our state. I was the mayor of the state's largest city, and she was the attorney general for the state of New Jersey. Newark was in crisis. We had spiking violent crime. The drug crisis in our city was palpable. Residents were afraid. And the biggest issue people talked about in our public polling was the crisis of crime. What we got in Ann Milgram was, for our city, a champion, someone that had a depth of knowledge about the issues from her being a prosecutor, an advocate for civil rights, and she became, for the state of New Jersey, a nationally known pioneer in public safety. My colleague, Senator Menendez, has already mentioned the statistical data that supports the simple truth. She helped to drive down crime to historic lows in places all over the state of New Jersey. For me, she was an extraordinary partner who had a holistic understanding of what real public safety is. It is not a police officer on every corner. It is this understanding that these issues go deeper, that there is an intrinsic tie between public safety and ideals of justice, transparency, and accountability. Her success as an attorney general led to her continuing that pathway of being a pioneer. She went to work with the Arnold Foundation and helped to further advance ideals of reform in how we address safety and security in our communities. She has now become one of the preeminent experts on the very issues she would be dealing with should she be confirmed. She is someone that gives me hope about our country, that we cannot be chained to the drug war policies of the past, but find ways that actually produced evidence-based results. I am so confident in her leadership, not just because of the pattern of her career of success after success, successful innovation after pioneering triumph, but I know her as a person. I know her character. I know her core. She is an extraordinary American. She is a celebrated leader in the state of New Jersey, and I am confident for our country in this time when we are still dealing with the travesties of a failed war on drugs, that she will do for this country what she did for cities like Camden and Newark, deliver public safety and a deeper, more meaningful justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker, for that inspiring statement. Finally, before we return to Senator Padilla, one of our colleagues from the great state of Louisiana is going to introduce Mr. Polite. I understand Senator Cassidy may be joining us by remote. I hope so. Senator,
You should be seeing me, Mr. Chair.
I hope
Do you have
so.
me?
You can
Do you have
proceed,
me?
and I think we will find you. There you
I
are.
should be on.
There you are.
Do you got me?
Yes. Please proceed.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley. It is a privilege to introduce New Orleans native and former U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Louisiana, Kenneth Polite. He is the nominee for the Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division in the Department of Justice. Mr. Polite has succeeded with his intelligence, hard work, and support from his family. He started his life in the Calliope projects in New Orleans, raised by a single mom, driven to provide a future for her children. His mother, Rosalind, took classes at Xavier University, gained employment in the state probation and parole typing pool, which enabled her to move off of public assistance and out of the projects into her own home. She taught her children the power of education by, among other things, taking them to the public library every weekend. It paid off. Mr. Polite received a full scholarship to De La Salle High School. He graduated as valedictorian and subsequently graduated from Harvard University and Georgetown Law School. With his background of hard work and dedication and 2 decades of litigation and management experience in criminal, civil, and compliance law, Mr. Polite is clearly qualified. He's also highly recommended by officials across the political spectrum back home. Republican Louisiana Attorney General Jeff Landry wrote a letter to this committee saying of Mr. Polite's time as U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Louisiana that he was, quote, not only an effective crime fighter, but also an invaluable member of the community. Mr. Polite is also endorsed by Mayor LaToya Cantrell of New Orleans and the City of New Orleans Department of Police, sheriffs, district attorneys, faith-based leaders, as well as the FBI New Orleans Field Office former Special Agent in Charge, Michael Anderson, and former Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Daniel H. Evans. I look forward to the committee and the full Senate taking up and approving Mr. Kenneth Polite's nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. Has Senator Padilla joined us by remote, I hope, to introduce?
Yes, I'm here.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologize for the back and forth. We're wrapping up a markup in Environment and Public Works. I do expect to join you in person in a little while, but in the meantime, I want to thank you and Ranking Member Grassley for the opportunity to introduce Ur Jaddou from the great state of California as President Biden's nominee to be the Director of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services at the Department of Homeland Security. USCIS plays a critical role in our immigration system, as every member of this committee knows. It is the agency tasked with processing and adjudicating visa applications, asylum petitions, and employment authorizations. It also handles the process for granting citizenship to immigrants who have worked hard to come to the United States and pursue the American dream. Ms. Jaddou has spent her long and distinguished career working to improve the lives of immigrants in the United States. This work is personal to me and to her. I, as a son of immigrants, and her as a daughter of immigrants. Her mother was from Mexico and her father was from Iraq. Ms. Jaddou grew up in the California border community of Chula Vista, which is just 7 miles north of the Mexican border. She knows firsthand what it means to be from an immigrant family and how much immigrants contribute to the diversity of our country and to the fabric of our communities and, of course, to our economy. I believe Ms. Jaddou is uniquely qualified to serve as Director of USCIS at this critical time. In 2014, she was named Chief Counsel for USCIS, where she led an office of 270 attorneys around the country who provided legal advice to the agency. This included advising on policies and programs, changes in statutes and regulations, and other complex legal issues. During her time as Chief Counsel, she also worked closely with the DHS Office of General Counsel and her counterparts at Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection. Her understanding of immigration law and how USCIS functions is second to none. Her career began on Capitol Hill as counsel to Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren. She went on to become the Majority Chief Counsel to the House Immigration Subcommittee when Congresswoman Lofgren was named chair of that subcommittee. She also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Regional, Global, and Functional Affairs at the State Department's Bureau of Legislative Affairs. And most recently, she served as Director of DHS Watch, a project of America's Voice. I want to close with the story that Ms. Jaddou shared with me that perfectly demonstrates her passion for this work, for immigration law, and her commitment to service. While she was a student at UCLA Law School, there was no tenured immigration law professor on staff or an immigration law clinic where she and her peers could help immigrants with their cases. Instead of being deterred, she sought the guidance of her professors, and she and her classmates started their own immigration law clinic. I think it embodies the passion and initiative that we need in the next director of USCIS. She's the right person to lead this agency, and I strongly support her nomination. I urge you all to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Padilla. And now I'd ask our first nominee on the first panel. Please stand to be sworn. If you please raise your right hand, do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show that the witness answered in the affirmative. Ms. Cunningham, please proceed with your opening remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Durbin. Thank you, Ranking Member Grassley, and thank you to the entire committee for scheduling this hearing. I also appreciate the committee's flexibility in the scheduling because I had to attend to a pressing family emergency. I also want to thank President Biden for the nomination. I'm truly humbled and honored. I have some people here to introduce, some people who are present in the room, and also some people who are unable to attend. I'm going to start with the people who are unable to attend. First, I want to introduce my mother. Her name is Patricia Mae Cunningham. She was born and raised in Paducah, Kentucky. She was a high school English teacher, teaching in the Detroit public schools for almost 30 years. And she's also literally an embodiment of my heart outside of my body. And as I sit before this committee, my heart is partially broken because my mom is facing a very serious medical issue, which is the only reason she is not present today. I love you, Mom, and I will see you again very soon. Next, I want to introduce my father. His name is Elisha Donald Cunningham. He was born and raised in Talladega, Alabama. He is a veteran of the Vietnam War. He worked in the automobile industry for approximately 50 years. I love you, Dad, and thank you for being there to support Mom through this difficult challenge. Next, I want to introduce my aunt, Dorothy Clemens. She was a longtime resident of the Washington, D.C. area and like a second mother to me. She worked for the federal government for most of her life, and in addition, unfortunately, she cannot be here because she passed away in 2015. But I'm confident that she is watching and sending her support. I want to thank the larger Cunningham family, the larger Clemens family, my friends, loved ones, significant other, and other people who have really sent their support my way. I want to turn to introduce the people who are present in the room today, starting with Dr. Manira Kapadia. I've known her since we were 6 years old. She was my first best friend, and she drove all the way from North Carolina to be here to support me today. Next to her is Judge Kiana Lillard. I've known her since freshman year of high school, and she is also a very dear friend and supported me on this journey today. Next to her is Ms. Jan Ann Dubin. She is a consultant in Chicago and another dear friend, and I thank her for her support. Last but not least, I want to thank my colleagues at Perkins Coie for all of their support. I truly appreciate it, and without further ado, I look forward to answering the committee's questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. Yours is an amazing story. It brings you to this moment before the Senate Judiciary Committee and aspiring to this judgeship. And it really is star-studded, things you have done, chemical engineering from MIT and Harvard and so forth. Let me ask you this question. At this point in your career, you seem to be at the top of your game. Why do you want to give it up to be on the bench?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I can tell you that this is literally my dream job. I recall when I was fortunate enough to clerk for the court in 2001 to 2002, one of the first days walking around and really seeing the pictures of the judges on the walls. And I saw a court that had fine jurists, but it was very homogeneous, if I must admit. There were all white judges and only 2 women at that time. And at that point in time, I kind of put it in my mental vision board that I hoped that one day I could be a judge at that court. So I'm truly humbled to be sitting here before you today, and it's really a dream job that I've aspired to.
And you've seen a number of judges as a litigator, as clerk. What do you think are the shortfalls of some and the benefits that others bring to the bench?
Thank you for that question, Senator. So in general, I have been very fortunate to both clerk for a wonderful judge and also appear in front of wonderful judges across the country. In general, I've appeared in front of judges that really have upheld all the standards of being a good judge. These are fair, impartial, unbiased people who come to the judging without any sort of prejudgment. So I feel like that is really great. In terms of being a judge, and if I were fortunate enough to be confirmed, I really would bring those same qualities to the bench, and I'd also really make sure that I carefully gave every party a chance to be heard and carefully studied the arguments and faithfully applied the law to the facts of a case.
Some critics argue that the jury system may not be up to the 21st century challenges, that many issues coming before juries are so technical, so complicated, that the average layman, laywoman, layman would have difficulty understanding them and really coming to a conclusion that as a basis for a verdict or decision. You're in one of those rarefied atmospheres of the law where there's just that sort of technicality and complexity. What has been your observation on the performance of juries with those challenges?
Senator, I've been fortunate enough to try a number of cases, and I've seen juries really meet the task. They absolutely will pay attention to all of the arguments, and what has been incumbent on really all of the advocates is to make sure to explain the technology so it's understandable to a layperson. That really is a duty of every zealous advocate and something that I have really tried to fulfill in my role as an advocate to date.
Thank you. Senator Grassley?
Thank you very much. Congratulations to you, Ms. Cunningham. It is important for the Federal Circuit to protect the rights of private property owners under the Fifth Amendment taking clause. I'm going to give you some facts. At the Supreme Court, taking clause relief was granted to 35% of private property owners between 1979 and 2015, where in state and federal courts, excluding the Federal Circuit, the success rate of regulatory takings claims from that same period of time was 9 9/10%. Lastly, Justice Thomas has cited data showing that only 1 6/10% of the taking claims under Lucas were successful from 92 to 2017 in the federal circuits where you will be sitting. These aren't exactly apple to apples comparisons, but there is a trend there. So, do you think it's a problem that the takings claims seem to be far less successful in the federal circuit than in other tribunals, and what do you think accounts for the difference?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. In general, I think that while I've told you already, I've been a patent litigator for the last 20 years and have not actually litigated any takings cases. What I can tell you is that if I were fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would take that area very seriously, no pun intended, and would also be sure to faithfully apply the law to the facts of any case before me. In terms of the statistics, I believe that the court faithfully tries to apply the law to the facts of a case, so I think it really depends very much on the facts of each case that comes before the court.
If you'll do no more for me than just take that into consideration, that we seem to get less relief under the taking constitutional rights than in the federal circuit than we do at other tribunals, I would consider that quite an accomplishment today. In the wake of the T.C. Heartland, what do you see as the role of the Federal Circuit in enforcing proper venue in patent cases?
Thank you for that question, Senator. T.C. Heartland, obviously the venue case that came down, has led to cases being filed in different jurisdictions and potentially a shift of some of the cases from some of the jurisdictions where they were filed previously. In general, I feel like the Federal Circuit will, of course, and I recognize that if are fortunate enough to be confirmed, would be bound by all Supreme Court precedent, including that case, and I would faithfully apply that case to any of the issues that came before me.
Okay. My last question, as a general matter, do you think it's appropriate for district judges to actively create favorable patent venues in their courts?
Thank you for that question, Senator. In general, I think that district court judges, just like all judges, need to be bound by the rule of law and just being focused on applying the law to the facts of each case without really taking into consideration regarding what sorts of cases they might want to appear before them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. The next senator seeking recognition is Senator Coons.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I'll defer to my colleague from New Jersey who would like to make just a minute of brief remarks.
Of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to have 60 seconds. You know, we have these hearings, and this is one of those moments where I feel this sense of exhaustion and exaltation at the same time. And we are in this period, almost 250 years of American history, where we still are counting the first black person to do this, the first black person to do this. And I just wanted to say for this moment, and have no questions for the witness, how extraordinary it is that she is a history maker and a rule breaker should she be confirmed. This is a long and tortured history of federal courts in this country, from Dred Scott to Plessy versus Ferguson to even recent decisions that trouble me on voting rights. But we have to mark these moments where we are making extraordinary progress. The witness before us today is an extraordinary human being by any measure. And I just want to say for the record that the history of our country, our ancestors, black and white, a rainbow coalition of people that have struggled to make a day like this possible, our ancestors are rejoicing, and I'm so grateful to see the witness before us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Booker. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Cunningham, welcome. You have very strong credentials and have represented some of America's most successful and best resourced companies like Intel or Microsoft or General Motors. And I'm someone who in IP is always concerned about balance in policy, balance in experience, balance in advocacy. I just am interested in your views broadly, as well as your experience around solo inventors, small startup companies, because often they have quite different experiences in our IP system and different views on the importance of patent protection in particular. Have you represented a small startup company or a solo inventor, or are you aware of the challenges that sometimes face these smaller players when they seek protection under our patent system?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. So my representations have been very broad. I've represented both individuals and large companies, as you already indicated, and also smaller companies. So I do have that breadth of representation.
And what do you see as the differences in how a General Motors or a Microsoft experiences our patent system versus the somewhat iconic, I know, garage inventor?
Sure. I think usually the differences come down to kind of the resources that are available to the companies versus the smaller individuals. So really ensuring equal access for everybody, including the garage inventor, as you indicated, as well as the large companies that may be more well-heeled, is important in our system.
We're in the middle, on the floor of the Senate right now, in debating and hopefully moving towards a final vote on a bill designed to strengthen innovation, R&D, our competitiveness as a country. And I'm concerned about China's ongoing theft of American intellectual property. I'm also alarmed by the contrast between China's recent efforts to bolster its IP regimes and the weakening of protections for creators and innovators in our system. How do you view the challenge or the potential threat to our global leadership in IP by China?
Thank you for that question, Senator. So in general, I've seen some statistics, for example, that show that China is involved in potentially 60% or so of trade secret cases, and I'm aware of some of the theft concerns and some of the issues that I believe this body and Congress at large are considering. I also am aware of a fairly recent suit where there was essentially an anti-suit injunction that took place, and then the Texas court, it was the Eastern District of Texas, I believe, before Judge Gilstrap. It looks like you're familiar with this particular decision I'm describing, Senator Coons. But in that particular case, it was a situation where the Texas court decided that that court could go ahead and proceed on the merits. But I think that's another concern, and I think it interrelates with the concern that you flagged.
One of the areas that Senator Tillis and I worked hard to try and find some common ground and some path forward on in the last Congress is subject matter the eligibility to Section 101 jurisprudence. And I would argue, we have heard from many former heads of the PTO, many practitioners in the field, even judges on the circuit to which you've been nominated, that there is profound uncertainty about the path forward in Section 101 jurisprudence. And I recognize there's real limitations on what you can say in a confirmation hearing, but do you believe the Federal Circuit could provide greater clarity or certainty in this area? Are you concerned that some critical technologies around things like artificial intelligence or personalized medicine are now not eligible for patents, or there's lack of real clarity and that's impacting our competitiveness as a country, particularly in these two critical areas?
Thank you for that question, Senator Coons. So I know this is an area that I think is near and dear to your heart as well as to some of the other senators' hearts. And in general, in terms of Section 101, I think the impact of the Alice and Mayo decisions and kind of that framework, the two-step framework that it looks like you're familiar with that was set up, has led to decisions where there is more in terms of cases where really there's Section 101 invalidation decisions that come down. It comes down in a variety of areas, as you indicated. Because some of these cases may likely come before me, I can't speak to it because I completely understand my duty to not prejudge any matters.
Understood.
But I do recognize that this is an important area, an area that deserves attention, and an area that the Supreme Court is considering taking up a cert petition on as well.
Last question, if I could. A decade ago, we passed and the President signed into law the American Invents Act. One of its core goals was increased efficiency and the improvement of patent quality and the reduction of duplicative litigation. A decade later, is it your impression that that goal's been achieved or not? And what, if anything, has surprised you about the implementation or interpretation or real-world impacts of that legislation?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. So in general, as you indicated, that legislation was passed in 2011, and it really has led to a number of, especially IPR petitions have really been a boon effort, and I think that has led to more people really seeking from the PTO sort of the invalidity decisions that they may want to try to get in place, or at least challenging the validity of a patent before the PTO as opposed to strictly before the district courts. I feel like it has led to some decrease in filings, at least in terms of dealing with some issues in terms of invalidity before the district courts. Again, I feel like as a nominee, I can't speak to exactly where all of these things would go because various issues, of course, come before the Federal Circuit. But I do recognize that the AIA has had a huge impact and was really the biggest sea change since the 1952 Patent Act.
Well, I appreciate I'm glad that you have been nominated by our president, and I look forward to supporting you and appreciate your answers to my questions, constrained as they are by the context in which you appear, and look forward to your service on the Federal Circuit. Thank you, Ms. Cunningham.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Senator Hirono was hoping to be here, but apparently she hasn't made it yet, I'm sorry to say. I want to thank Ms. Cunningham for her testimony, and I also want to say, reminiscent of what has been said by Senator Booker, when you're in the category of a first, you have to be the best. And I believe President Biden has found in your nomination that kind of quality. We thank you. You may be receiving written questions following the hearing from senators, which we hope you will diligently respond to as quickly as possible. Ms. Cunningham, thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
With that, we move to our second panel, and I ask for everyone's patience while we finalize the setup for 5 nominees. It'll take a minute or two to put the name tags and seats in position.
So what is being on be members of. They've already been. Oh, they have. Oh, then I think I'll stay. But you can ask her. Hey, I was just thinking when I asked you, do we have to be socially distant?
I think we have the 5 witnesses, and we'll hear from them in their opening statements after they stand to be sworn. Please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? The record again reflect that the panel has in its entirety answered in the affirmative. I think Ms. Strickland, you are the first to proceed with an opening statement. Please.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you, Senator Durbin and Ranking Member Grassley, for setting this hearing. I want to thank President Biden for the honor of this nomination. I want to thank my home state senators, Senator Heinrich and Lujan, for their support, their recommendation, and their kind opening statements on my behalf. I would like to acknowledge my parents, who I know are watching this back home in New Mexico, my husband, who was able to come to this hearing today to support me, and his parents, my in-laws, who are watching our son at home so that my husband could be here at the hearing today. I want to also thank my law partner for all of her support during this process, and all of the committee members for your time. And with that, I'll be glad to answer all of your questions.
Thank you very much. I believe Mr. Chipman, you are next and may proceed with your opening remarks.
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, members of the committee. Thank you, Senator Durbin, for your generous introduction earlier. I'm honored to be here today and grateful to President Biden for nominating me to the position of Director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. I thank my wife, Tara, who is here with me and my family, including my children, Carson and Allison, for all their love and support. ATF's mission is critical to our nation's public safety. If confirmed, I will proudly lead the Bureau and serve once again alongside its dedicated and talented agents, investigators, and professional staff as they work every day to keep our communities safe from criminal shootings and other violent crime, firearms trafficking, bombings, arson, and more. When I first joined ATF in 1988 at the age of 22, I swore an oath to defend my country, uphold our Constitution, and protect the American public. During 25 years of public service until my retirement as a special agent in 2012, I honored that oath every day. I know the danger that agents face in the field to ensure public safety and bring criminals to justice. As a young agent, I was a certified explosives specialist on the National Response Team and a tactical operator on the Special Response Team, ATF's version of SWAT. I understand the physical and emotional stress that agents are under, particularly when working on crimes involving mass casualties and destruction. I was an investigative first responder to the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York and the 1995 bombing of the Federal Building in Oklahoma City. I have felt the pride that ATF agents experience when they prevent gun violence or apprehend criminals who violate our nation's gun laws. I disrupted firearms trafficking organizations that funneled hundreds of firearms along the iron pipeline from Tidewater, Virginia to New York, and I arrested a straw purchaser who bought a handgun that a child used to shoot a cop. The leadership positions I held at ATF grounded me in what it will take to improve Bureau operations and morale. I've supervised agents in the field multiple times. I used that experience to develop new approaches to combat homicides committed with firearms impacting communities across the United States. While at ATF headquarters during the Bush administration, I was responsible for all ATF field policies and procedures. I later oversaw all firearms programs and foreign offices for the entire Bureau. I launched the Violent Crime Impact Team program, credited with preventing gun homicides in 15 targeted cities. During my last several years at ATF, I had fiscal responsibilities. I oversaw large budgets, including the $50 million field operational budget, ATF's $80 million spectrum relocation program, and the $60 million assets forfeiture program. These experiences, hard won over the course of decades, will serve as my guide if I'm confirmed to lead the ATF. The Bureau has excelled at investigating crimes since the days of Eliot Ness. My leadership mission will be to sharpen ATF's focus while striving to prevent more violent crimes from occurring in the first place. I look forward to answering your questions today, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. Ms. Jaddou, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin. Thank you, Ranking Member Grassley. I greatly appreciate the honor to be considered by this committee for Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. I would especially like to thank Senator Padilla, my home state senator from beautiful California, for your kind and gracious introduction. I'd also like to thank Senator Feinstein for opening the door to federal service as a summer intern in your San Diego office 25 years ago. I come before you today the product of a uniquely American experience. My late dad, a Chaldean Catholic from northern Iraq, came to America as a bright-eyed foreign student in the 1950s with dreams of freedom, democracy, and opportunity. He also found love and marriage of almost 50 years to my late mom, an immigrant from Mexico, beautiful inside and out, who arrived with an equally ambitious American dream. My parents would go on to raise 3 daughters and strive for their American dream in a southern suburb of San Diego, less than 10 miles from the US-Mexico border. My husband, Peter, my rock, who's right behind me, is here today, along with our 2 amazing daughters, Soli and Luna, my sun and moon. Peter's family shares a very similar story. His parents, Coptic Christians from Egypt, immigrated to America to serve in the medical field. His dad served as a doctor in the US Navy as a lieutenant commander. His mom trained and became a radiation oncologist, helping thousands of cancer patients through very difficult times. America has been strengthened by the big dreams, hard work, and contributions of millions of immigrants and refugees who have come to our shores to forge a better life for themselves and their children. At the heart of a functioning immigration system is an agency that effectively processes immigration and naturalization applications under the law, like those of my family and so many others. This means that USCIS must process applications fairly, efficiently, and in a humane manner, be accessible, transparent, and accountable, and safeguard the integrity of the system and ensure the security of the nation. My most immediate responsibilities, if confirmed, will be to return the agency to firm solvency, resolve dramatically increasing processing times and backlogs, and utilize 21st century tools. I'll work to ensure that USCIS retains the confidence of the American public as an agency able to fulfill its mission. In addition, I'll work to ensure that the hardworking and dedicated men and women, my former colleagues at USCIS, have the resources, support, and leadership they need to carry out their roles without undue difficulty. I'd like to thank the President for nominating me, Secretary Mayorkas, and many others who've supported me through this process. Thank you very much for considering me for the honor of serving as USCIS Director.
Thank you, Mr. Jaddou. Ms. Milgram, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the Judiciary Committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am grateful to President Biden for nominating me to this important position, and I want to extend my deepest thanks to Senator Booker and Senator Menendez for their very kind introductions. At the outset, I want to thank my family for their love and support. My husband and my nephew are here with me today. My parents, my sister and her family, and our son are watching on TV. As I sit here today, I cannot help but think about my grandfather and my great-grandfather, both police officers who rose to become the chief of police in South Amboy, New Jersey. I know that they would be incredibly proud to see their granddaughter nominated to lead the dedicated, passionate, and tenacious professionals at the Drug Enforcement Administration. Today, the DEA is called upon to address some of the most significant challenges in our nation. We are in the midst of an ongoing crisis of prescription opioid addiction. It is a homegrown problem where most of those addicted to opioids begin by taking prescription drugs that they are prescribed or that they find in the medicine cabinets of their families and friends. The prescription opioid crisis has now transformed into a national epidemic that is driven by the distribution of illicit fentanyl, which is senselessly costing hundreds of thousands of American lives. There are sophisticated international drug trafficking organizations that are brazenly distributing highly addictive drugs in our communities, accompanied by waves of senseless violence. And Americans in the grips of addiction are far too often unable to get the necessary treatment and support that they need. We need to confront these challenges head on, and I intend to do that. I also recognize that members of this committee and across Congress have spent countless hours working on solutions. And if I am confirmed, I look forward to collaborating with you to ensure that we make tangible, sustained, and measurable progress. My experience vigorously enforcing the law, both public safety and public health, will serve me well in this role. I have been an assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office, a federal prosecutor, and the state attorney general for New Jersey, where I led the 9,000-person Department of Law and Public Safety. As attorney general, I also oversaw the police department in Camden, New Jersey, which was then one of the most dangerous cities in America. Today, it is not. We worked tirelessly in partnership with the DEA and with other law enforcement agencies to reduce violence in Camden and to improve community relationships. And as a result, violence dropped by more than 40% in 1 year. Today, Camden is at historically low rates of crime and violence. If I am confirmed, I will bring this results-oriented focus in leading the professionals at the DEA as they carry out their vital mission to make our communities safer and healthier. I'm grateful for the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Milgram. Mr. Pleat.
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, members of the committee, thank you for today's hearing. I offer particular thanks to Senator Cassidy for his kind introduction and to both Senators Cassidy and Kennedy for their courtesies throughout this nomination process. Thank you both for your service to our nation and to the great state of Louisiana. I am grateful to President Biden for nominating me to serve in this important role at this important time. My wife, partner, and advocate, Dr. Florencia Greer-Polite, is here with me today, along with our wonderful daughters, Gabrielle and Lena. Watching from afar are my mother, Rosalind, my father, Kenneth Sr., my supportive in-laws, Gloria and Theodore, my siblings, Damian, Terrell, and Katrina, and scores of other friends, colleagues, and family members. Senators, I come from humble beginnings, the oldest child born to teenage parents in New Orleans. Raised in some of the city's most poverty-stricken areas, including the Callio Project in the lower Ninth Ward, my life was nonetheless rich with my family's love, and most importantly, my mother's sacrifice, investment, and commitment to my education. From Harvard University and Georgetown Law to a Third Circuit clerkship with my mentor, Judge Tom Ambrose, to prestigious law firms, in courtrooms, in boardrooms, to today's hearing and beyond, I am always representing and always reaching back to the community that helped shape me into a servant leader. I hail from a family of public servants. My mother recently retired after 34 years of service in the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. My father was a 37-year veteran of the New Orleans Police Department. My brother Damien is a captain in the Army Reserves and a detective with the Houston Police Department. Yet despite our connections to law enforcement, our family, like many Americans, has felt the pain of losing a loved one, my brother, to street violence. I carry his memory with me every day. I bring a wide-ranging legal perspective to this role, having served as the United States Attorney in the Eastern District of Louisiana, as well as an assistant U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, as well as a defense attorney with law firms in New York, New Orleans, and in Philadelphia. I also bring the unique insight that comes with serving as a chief compliance officer for a Fortune 500 company. If confirmed, I look forward to leading and working alongside the tremendous public servants in the criminal division. Its work, which includes combating cyber threats, COVID relief fraud, and exploitation of our nation's most vulnerable populations, is more essential than ever. Moreover, it requires even greater collaboration with U.S. attorneys' offices and federal, state, local, tribal, territorial, and international law enforcement partners. I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polite. What an amazing array in this panel of talent and experience, and we thank you, each and every one of you, for your willingness to engage in public service. We have questions to ask. With this panel, I wish I could ask each of you 5 minutes of questions, but you'll be spared from that ordeal, and we'll try to keep this as condensed as possible. But I do want to start with Mr. Chipman. Mr. Chipman, first, thank you for serving in law enforcement and risking your life for this nation. We cannot ever thank you enough, and your family for standing by you in this commitment. Buckle your seatbelt. You want to be ahead of the ATF? Hang on tight. They're coming after you, buddy. They are creating some fictional stories about your life and your experience, and you're going to have to try to weather this storm. It's going to be rough from time to time, but I want to give you an opening opportunity. It seems that some on the political fringe are willing to say whatever it takes to try to sink your nomination. That includes peddling baseless claims about your work as an ATF special agent in Waco, Texas, and statements that you made regarding attacks on a helicopter supporting ATF operations in Waco. I also understand they've gone so far as to Photoshop your face on somebody else's body to try to establish that you were in Waco or in some other place when you weren't. So now's your chance to at least open up by telling us the facts. Would you comment on your role at Waco, the purported photograph, and the statements you made regarding the helicopter attack?
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, for the opportunity to address these issues. First, I was directed to report to Waco in May of 1993. That was in the month after the events at Waco had concluded. My role was to be assigned to a group of DOJ employees who were investigating the events there. And one of the reasons I was selected is because I had no involvement in the actual case that was being examined. With regards to a photo that I too have seen on the internet, this is not me. It is, in fact, a real photo that comes from the time of Waco. It has a stamp on it that showed that it was evidence. But during the course of the investigation, I interviewed all of the ATF agents at Waco, and that is not an ATF agent. And then finally, the question about what I believe you're responding to is I had the opportunity to do an event on Reddit
Reddit is one of those things where people fire questions at you and you have to type very fast. And I got a question about the lethality of the .50 caliber rifle and how often it was used in crime in the United States. And I was trying to be candid and say that the only case that I knew of that .50 calibers were used was at this incident at Waco that I was familiar with. And I was also familiar that Branch Davidians had in fact shot two of the planes, helicopters. There were bullet holes, and I saw the pictures of that. I could have done a better job by describing them as being forced down because of the gunfire as opposed to shot down, which might have left the impression that they were blown out of the sky, which they were not. And I regret that confusion I added.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure you'll have ample opportunity to answer that and similar questions as we proceed. Ms. Milgram, I think one of the really startling things that I learned in this Judiciary Committee many years ago as we considered the role of the DEA was the responsibility of the Drug Enforcement Administration of the United States federal government to determine each year how many opioid pills would be produced by pharmaceutical companies across our nation. Between 1993 and 2015, the agency which you are hoping to lead allowed production of oxycodone to increase 39-fold, from 3.5 tons to 151 tons with DEA approval. Senator Kennedy and I authored legislation to require DEA in our quota setting to take into account the fact that that was way too many, and there were many people who were abusing it, and too many overdose deaths. I'm encouraged that the quota has gone down from 14 billion opioids on the market in 2016 to 9.7 billion in 2019, but that is still too much. Those pills are enough, that quota is enough for every adult in America to have a 2-week supply of opioids. Haven't we learned our lesson? Have you addressed this issue? Are you aware of it?
Senator, thank you for that question, and thank you also for the leadership that both you and Senator Kennedy have shown in raising this issue and in passing the SUPPORT Act. I agree with you that drug diversion remains of critical and urgent importance for the DEA. We've seen between 2019 and 2020, approximately 90,000 Americans have overdosed. And again, many of those individuals are starting on opioids through their medicine cabinets and through the medicine cabinets of their family and friends. So I share your concern about this issue. You have my commitment that if I am confirmed, this will be a high priority issue to look at the quotas and to work with you, I hope, and other members of this committee on this important issue.
I'll just say to my colleagues, it is hard to understand how the pharmaceutical industry can year after year ask for approval for the production of billions of these opioid pills when we're going through this scourge of overdose and all the heartbreak that it brings with it. And I hope the DEA will finally stand up and say enough. Thank you very much, Ms. Milgram. Senator Grassley.
One question for Ms. Strickland. What, if any, is your relationship with the group Demand Justice or its leaders like Brian Fallon and Chris King?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I have spoken with Mr. King.
And that's the answer to your question. You've had one conversation with him.
I believe I've spoken to him twice, maybe 3 times.
Okay. Now for Ms. Jaddou. As you're aware, the Immigration Nationalization Act grants Homeland Security the authority to temporarily parole an alien into the country on a case-by-case basis for specific reasons. Unlike with DACA, aliens who are paroled into the United States are eligible to adjust their status and obtain green cards. Now, the Vice President has said and called for granting parole in place to countless young people who are living in the United States illegally. This would have the effect of bypassing Congress and giving millions of people living illegally in the United States a path to legal status or U.S. citizenship, unlike some of us who would like to do that if we could get it done reasonably on a bill passed in Congress. Do you agree with the Vice President's proposal to grant parole in place to potential millions of so-called dreamers?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. My job as USCIS Director, if I'm confirmed, will be to work with the attorneys in the agency to understand that provision and understand who it could apply to. I would have to study what the Vice President is recommending or suggesting, and I would have to work with the people who understand the provision of law and apply it to the facts of the individual on a case-by-case basis to determine that answer.
Okay, then let's go to the law. One more question for you. How is letting an entire class of people receive parole consistent with an immigration law's clear language that parole should only be on a case-by-case basis for specific reasons?
Thank you, Senator. One of the things that USCIS does as it adjudicates on a case-by-case basis. Individuals must submit a form that is the general access that people have to any sort of request made before the agency. They must provide quite a bit of information about themselves before they can even be considered, and many background checks are done on each individual case, and an adjudicator says yes, no, may request additional information, and that's how an adjudication is done.
Mr. Chipman, on March 25th this year, Senator Johnson and I wrote to ATF asking for records relating to the October 2018 Hunter Biden firearm incident. In response to my letter, ATF has refused to provide any records, citing the Freedom of Information Act, which is totally irrelevant to ATF's responsibility to comply with legitimate congressional oversight requests. Congress isn't subject to FOIA restrictions, and ATF's use of the law as a shield is incompetent. If confirmed, what steps will you take to produce records to this committee relating to Hunter Biden's October 2018 firearm incident?
Senator Grassley, thank you for asking me this question. If I am confirmed as ATF Director, I will abide by all ATF policies and DOJ policies to ensure that you receive the records that you require.
This matter has been all over the news. What else do you need to learn before you can make a decision to do what I ask you to do?
Senator, I am familiar with what I've seen in the news, but I think if I'm confirmed as ATF Director, it'll be my responsibility to respond based on the facts, and I'm sure that there would be more facts available to me if I'm confirmed.
I will submit the rest of my questions for answer in writing.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chipman, as you know, the ATF's National Tracing Center in West Virginia is our country's only crime gun tracing facility. When a gun is found at a crime scene, law enforcement authorities want to find the gun's last known owner. They submit a trace request to the National Tracing Center. The National Tracing Center receives nearly 1,700 trace requests every day. Is on pace to receive 550,000 requests this year, is all a record high. Incredible amount of time-sensitive work for the NTC. Now, I know from my days in law enforcement how important it was to trace a gun found at a crime scene. It could be the key to solving the crime, preventing others. So I think most Americans would be shocked if they knew this is the observed reality of crime gun tracing at ATF's National Tracing Center. Laws have been passed have forced you into that situation. Congress, at the behest, I think, of some in the gun lobby, prohibited the ATF from electronically searching gun sales records currently in its position. You have tens of millions of these records, many of them stored in metal shipping containers in the parking lot, some frayed, decay, barely legible. again, a number of us on this committee have served in law enforcement, and we know how important it is to be able to trace a gun. So if anything else you want to trace, we do it electronically, scan it. Any agency in the 21st century do that. But you are forced by the laws that we pass, foolish laws, to have this labor-intensive process, which, of course, hinders law enforcement all over the country. I think we have to act swiftly to bring the ATF into the 21st century. Just yesterday, I reintroduced the Crime Gun Tracing Modernization Act. It's supported by the Justice Department. It would allow ATF to electronically search crime gun records. So, Mr. Chairman, my question is, do you agree that further improving the efficiency of crime gun tracing is going to help law enforcement throughout the country?
Thank you, Senator, for this question, and thank you for being so passionate about something that's just so critical to not only the functions of state and local law enforcement, which ATF supports, but the mission of ATF to disrupt firearms trafficking. As a young agent in Norfolk, Virginia, there was not a single trafficking case that I was able to make that didn't rely on the tracing center. And I can confirm those pictures are accurate, at least as of 10 years ago when I oversaw the activities there, that we have dedicated federal employees that are just meeting obstacles that are inhibiting the ATF from doing a good job. And that is telling local cops where crime guns came from, which is just a very valuable lead.
I'm told that electronic traces could potentially save hundreds of thousands of hours on traces overall. I think that's why so many law enforcement agencies support my legislation. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter letters of support from the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association and the Major Cities Chiefs Association.
Without objection.
And since 2013, Mr. Chip and I have been working with ATF on bipartisan legislation to curb straw purchasing and firearms trafficking. I worked with Senator Collins and Chairman Durbin to reintroduce our legislation that help us stop this kind of straw purchases. Why is that important that we be able to do that?
Well, it's critical. One of the most significant cases I ever was able to make in my ATF career was actually in Waco. We had an officer shot by a juvenile, and I was able to trace the gun using the tracing center and was able to identify that an adult had straw purchased this gun for the child. You know, this is what places everyone in danger, and it's something we've known has occurred for a long time. And I think that working collaboratively with the licensees to teach them how to observe this criminal behavior and stop it, but also investigating these crimes is just absolutely essential.
And I'll close with this. I'm a gun owner, but when I go to the gun store in Vermont, buy a gun, they say hi to me. I saw your cousin the other day. How are you doing? Oh, by the way, we have to do a background check on you. And I say, fine. I want it to be done for everybody. I don't want straw purchases. And most gun shop owners don't want some of these gun show things where they can have straw purchases. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Cornyn.
Mr. Chairman, before my 5 minutes starts, I'd like to just respectfully note my objection to 5 executive branch nominees here, all for very significant Senate-confirmed positions. And the chairman has given us these 5 nominees and 5 minutes to ask them questions. This is to me, it trivializes our constitutional responsibility of advice and consent. I don't think we have much choice but to proceed to try to ask what questions we can, but this is really a joke. And when it comes to our constitutional responsibilities, I understand the eagerness of the chairman and the administration to move nominees as fast as they can. It's a frustration for every administration, every Senate majority, but this is really beyond ridiculous, and I just would respectfully note my
Senator, if I could
Objection.
respond. We're doing our best to move these nominees in a timely fashion.
Well, this
But
is a drive-by hearing,
But I would,
is what this is.
I would like to add for the record that many of the positions they are seeking were either left vacant or filled by temporary appointment under the previous administration. This administration is bringing the nominees for Senate confirmation.
Mr. Chairman, I support the nomination and will, in all likelihood, vote for the confirmation of some of these nominees, but there's some I have serious questions about that I'd like to have a chance to ask them. But having noted my objection, let me just proceed. Ms. Jaddou, in 2015, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations here in the Senate did an extensive multi-year investigation into the placement of unaccompanied children with sponsors here in the United States. They documented that in one case, the Office of Refugee Relocation placed 8 children in a forced labor condition. Basically, what happened is human traffickers posed as sponsors, and then ORR placed these unaccompanied children with sponsors who then trafficked them and used them for forced labor. Do you believe the current procedures that are in place to vet sponsors for placement of unaccompanied children are acceptable?
Thank you, Senator, for that really important question. As a mother, the protection of children is, I can't even describe how important it is, not only to me personally, but parents everywhere. On this specific issue, as the director of USCIS, if I'm confirmed, this is not generally the area where I would have a specialty, and I don't necessarily have a specialty in the placement of children in specific homes. I am aware that USCIS currently is assisting in the mission of Homeland, that HHS, Health and Human Services at the moment, and they have been trained under the current procedures. But unfortunately, I have not been brought up to speed on those issues, and I would certainly, that would be one of the first things I would want to do to ensure that the officers of USCIS have the greatest amount of information and training available to them to place children in safe and loving homes.
Are you aware that as of May 24th, 2021, that the Biden administration has 18,187 children in custody?
I was not aware of that specific number, but I have heard it's a larger number.
And are you aware that since the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations conducted this multi-year investigation into the placement of unaccompanied children with sponsors, there has been no change in the policy. In fact, there is no government agency that is responsible for following up on the placement of these children. Are you aware of that?
As I stated, sir, I was not aware. That's not a process that I'm a specialist in. I don't have much expertise in that area, but certainly to the extent that USCIS officers, if I'm confirmed, are involved in that process, I would like to learn as much about it, and I thank you for bringing that to my attention. I would definitely like to take a look as soon as I'm confirmed.
As a matter of fact, on March the 11th, 2021, the Biden administration entered into a new memorandum of understanding regarding unaccompanied children, terminating the cooperation between HHS, ORR, ICE, and CBP with regard to vetting the background of the sponsors with whom these unaccompanied children are placed. In other words, as bad as this committee report is, and it dates back to 2015, there's been no change in the follow-up of these children that are being placed with potential traffickers, people who would subject them to forced labor, assault them, abuse them, exploit them. The Biden administration has just made that harder to vet because they terminated the memorandum of April the 13th, 2018. Mr. Chipman, I wanted to ask you, do you recognize an individual right to keep and bear arms?
Thank you for that question, Senator. The Supreme Court has recognized that right. I'm a gun owner myself, and the answer is yes.
And is a law-abiding gun owner a threat to public safety, in your view?
Thank you for that question, Senator. If the term law-abiding means someone has lawfully possessed a gun, there are often occasions that that person then goes on to commit a violent crime. If you're just saying characterize the majority of gun owners, the majority of gun owners are law-abiding.
What's the role of the ATF or the federal government in restricting the right of law-abiding gun owners to keep and bear arms? You said that some of them may go on to commit crimes, but so far we're not living with, I guess, the movie The Minority Report, where we have the capacity or ability to investigate pre-crimes. So what restrictions would you place on the right of a law-abiding citizen to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment?
If I'm confirmed as ATF director, it's ATF's responsibility to primarily enforce the National Firearms Act, the Gun Control Act, and our priority will be, focusing on people who break federal laws and attempt to, intervene before they kill someone. So that is a balance that we need to strike. But again, the Constitution is the guardrails to that activity.
I'll just say in conclusion, if the chairman will give me just a moment, that I think one of the areas that I do think that ATF needs to focus on is unlicensed firearms manufacturers that are not currently obligated, like federal firearms licensees are, to conduct background checks. Indeed, this is a loophole through which some individuals, for example, the shooter in Odessa, Texas, a few years back, circumvented the background check system by buying a AR-15 lookalike from a unlicensed firearms manufacturer. So I hope that's an area you will look at and work with us on.
Thank you, Senator. And if confirmed, I will strive to work with you on that. And I thank you for your dedication in improving the NICS system.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn and Senator Feinstein.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. While we are sitting here, we have a gunman in San Francisco shooting down people. The press say at this time, maybe 6 to 7 people have been killed. Mr. Chipman, gun violence is so prevalent in this country. What are the first steps you will take to do something about it, if any?
Senator, well, I wanted to say thank you for that question, but first, I'm sorry to hear that news. I wasn't aware of that. If I'm confirmed as ATF director, one of our priorities at ATF will be focusing on gun trafficking, the unlawful transfer of legal guns to criminals, and perhaps in this case, a crime like this could be prevented. So as ATF tries to solve crimes, we will have to strive just as hard to prevent them from ever happening in the first place.
Well, I thank you. And I guess I've been listening to these questions being asked and responded to for more than 20 years now, and nothing changes on the streets. And I think we all need to think a little bit about that. This is a gun-happy nation, and everybody can have their gun by the laws that can protect people from this kind of gun crimes. Last fiscal year, the number of inventory inspections conducted by ATF to ensure that weapons are not diverted to criminals fell to just over 5,800. And my understanding, that's down from 13,000 in fiscal year 2019. So your department is sitting by, and all of this is happening. At the same time, gun sales were spiking around the nation. Even before the pandemic, ATF inspected less than 15% of licensed dealers in a year. So I'm not a great fan of those numbers. If confirmed, what will you do specifically to increase the number of ATF inspections?
Thank you for this question, Senator, and it's a very important question. If confirmed, very early on in my tenure, I want to find out the reasons for that drop in statistics. One thing strikes me is I'm unsure how COVID impacted the ATF workforce. But certainly, when just looking at the numbers, we have to ensure that ATF inspectors are targeting those firearms dealers most at risk. I also see in those numbers that a large percentage of the inspections result in no findings, which suggests that in those cases, the dealer is compliant. So I think a whole review of what's going on to make sure that the limited resources that ATF is used efficiently to further this mission is absolutely critical, and thank you for bringing up this important point.
Well, thank you, and I will do everything within my power to see that you have the staff to do this if you really show that you're going to do it, because I am increasingly concerned as the numbers of mass shootings go up, people dying, and that is happening on our streets right now. Gun sales are spiking across the nation. And ATF's record has decreased from, as I understand it, down to 15% of licensed dealers being inspected in a year. Is that a correct figure? It was in the New York Times, 5/2/21.
Senator, thank you for that question. It is my understanding that ATF has not yet been able to meet a self-imposed goal of inspecting dealers every 3 years. It's something that ATF is mandated to do with explosives dealers. So I think it's a good goal. Again, if I'm confirmed, I will get to the bottom of this situation. And I thank you for your dedication in doing what you can to provide ATF the resources to get this important mission done.
Well, I hope you do that. I'm going to hold you to it. And if you don't, you're going to hear from me. So thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you,
Senator.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Senator Cornyn, I'd like to make a brief statement, not counting against my time at the outset. I just want to express agreement with what Senator Cornyn said, and while I'm certainly sympathetic to the need to get through nominees, it is different than establishing that we need to have all 5 of these nominees in a single panel in a single hearing. If we need to have more hearings, fine. If we need to have more panels of the same hearing, that's fine too. This is a difficult spot to cover. This many nominees of this much significant in one hearing can be tough. Thank you for letting me address that. Mr. Chapman, I'd like to start with you. I believe Senator Cornyn referred briefly to a statement that I independently found concerning, a statement that you had posted on Reddit back in 2019, when you said, quote, "While at ATF, I conducted studies involving people who failed background checks to determine how many later committed crimes with a gun. Many did. This is a perfect opportunity to arrest people before committing crimes rather than responding after the fact," close quote. I find this statement very troubling, especially troubling for someone who's been nominated to serve as the ATF director, because even setting aside for a minute the Second Amendment, even before you get to the Second Amendment, this violates our most fundamental rules of due process, talking about a desire to arrest people before committing crimes rather than after the fact. It's not how our criminal justice system works. And if that's how you view people, that is concerning to me. Now, this is compounded by other comments you've made that, to me, reflect a certain degree of disdain toward gun owners, and in particular, new gun owners. On April 3rd of 2020, just over a year ago, you gave an interview with Cheddar News, and you were talking about increases in gun sales, especially first-time gun owners who had decided to purchase a gun for the first time during the pandemic. In the interview, you openly mocked first-time gun owners, saying that they were, quote, more like Tiger King, and then advising them in quite a mockery to hide their gun, quote, behind the cans of tuna and beef jerky they have stored in a cabinet, and only bring that out if the zombies start to appear, close quote. When I first saw this, I watched the clip and I read the clip several times, hoping that I was missing context, hoping that there was something else there that would make this less troubling. It concerns me that you, as the nominee to be the director of the ATF, would have such a flippant and, if I may say so, utterly condescending attitude toward first-time gun owners in this country. I say this as a former federal prosecutor, one who worked with ATF agents and agents from many other agencies. This is a troubling, flippant attitude for somebody who's going to head this agency. Now, you may find it interesting to learn that a survey of federal firearms licensees conducted by the National Shooting Sports Foundation shows that retailers supported the highest average percent increase in sales to Black Americans during the first half of 2020, with large increases also to women and to Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans as well. So why would you choose to insult so many of your fellow Americans with a statement like this, based on the fact that they purchased a gun?
Senator, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address both of these comments that I believe were misunderstood and taken out of context. I'll start with the first. When I was talking about the prosecution of people who had lied and tried to buy a gun, clearly those people who lie and try have committed a serious federal felony. And what I suggested is if we did research, we could determine which of those people were most likely to later commit some violent crime. And I do believe it would be ATF's mission, that of prosecutors, to prosecute those people who committed a serious federal felony before, striking again and killing someone. With respect to the other quote, I'll just say briefly.
So are you saying that what you in fact meant was before committing other crimes and after committing a predicate crime? Is that what you're telling me that you meant when you said this is a perfect opportunity to arrest people before committing crimes rather than responding after the fact? Is that what you meant?
Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify. What I said was that I think that in certain circumstances, it is absolutely the mission of ATF to arrest people for lying on a federal firearms form, a 5-year felony.
Right, because that's a crime. That is a crime.
And it's the one I was speaking about in the quote that you were saying, sir.
Okay, but you said before committing crimes.
Before committing an additional violent crime, which is something I was seeing at ATF, that people would lie and try and then go through other means, acquire a gun, and hurt someone.
Okay, so that statement was sort of in invisible brackets? Is that what you mean? Or is that just what you're saying that you meant?
At the time, I did my best to communicate, and clearly, as exampled here, I fell short. I will try to do better.
Okay, how about the other statement?
With regards to the comments that I made on Cheddar, that was a lengthy interview. What I was trying to use is self-depreciating humor. The person who had a gun storm behind his tuna and beef jerky was me. And I was saying that all of us were acting in new ways as a response to COVID. And I thought that people should be very clear that when they bring a gun in their home, they need to be properly trained. So again, we have oftentimes the ability to talk to the media. Sometimes that's taken out of context, and I'm sorry for any confusion I made when I was trying to point out the fact that sometimes bringing a gun into your home if you're untrained is a particularly dangerous thing to do.
It does concern me that these statements that you say are taken out of context or misunderstood are not themselves out of context. When you view them in context against other statements you've made, statements, including statements that you made while you were representing as a lobbyist Americans for a Responsible Solution. You were talking about silencers, about sound suppressors used on firearms. You said, you know what protects your hearing better than a silencer? Earplugs. And you went on to say that making it easier for people to purchase silencers would make it easier for active shooters to inflict serious harm on our communities without being protected by trained law enforcement professionals. Now, the Washington Post, hardly a bastion of conservative right-wing nutcase journalism, gave that 3 Pinocchios. You were even more acerbic. You were even more aggressive, and I believe even more reckless when you gave a similar comment to the Salt Lake Tribune, my hometown paper, in response to legislation I had filed dealing with sound suppressors for firearms, recognizing that there are legitimate medical reasons why someone might want to protect their hearing using a combination of earplugs and sound suppressors. You said, quote, "The only people that benefit from this bill are gun lobbyists and criminals who want easier access to deadly weapons. That's why this irresponsible legislation couldn't get passed when Republicans had complete control of Congress. Instead of making it easier for firearms that could be used in ambushes and other attacks to enter our streets, Congress should focus on making the job of police officers who are trained to serve and protect the communities and their families safer." You're saying that the only people who could benefit from them are gun lobbyists and criminals who want to kill people. Is that statement also taken out of context? If so, what was the additional context? And how does this reflect the careful, measured judgment of one who would be in charge of enforcing our nation's gun laws?
Senator, thank you for the question about silencers, which have been regulated under the National Firearms Act since the 1930s. The effort to take the silencer out of that regulatory regime that has prevented silencers by more frequently being used in criminals, as an advocate, I thought that that was the wrong approach.
Yes, you made that quite clear, but that's not what I'm complaining about. What I'm complaining about is that you said the only people who could support this are gun lobbyists and people who want to engage in illegal shootings, people who want to engage in mass shootings or something like that. Do you stand by that statement?
Senator, I was trying to contrast the fact that silencers are legal. You purchase them through the National Firearms Act. The people who want them unregulated are those that want to have easier access.
You're not going to spit downwind and then tell us it's just raining. I mean, I'm sorry, there is no reasonable reading of this statement that can be interpreted this way. The only people that benefit from this bill are gun lobbyists and criminals who want easier access to deadly weapons. Is it not also true that some people might want to protect their hearing while shooting?
Senator, as I said before, it's my belief that those who want to buy silencers to protect their hearing, there's a method to do that. There are many companies that sell National Firearms Act weapons, and there's a process to do that. What I was addressing was making it easier for criminals to use silencers, a threat that our nation has really avoided because of a strong law passed in 1930.
Yeah. All right. Look, I get it. My time's expired. That's not what you said. That's not what you said at all. Nor is that the impact that this bill would have. The fact is that most people don't get sound suppressors because of the regulatorily inexpensive, time-consuming, burdensome process that is imposed by this law. And I think this is very concerning for someone who's had a series of inflammatory statements. It's very concerning that we're considering confirming you to be our lead law enforcement officer for our gun laws. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Polite, I assume you'll agree that it's wrong to pursue a criminal case for political purposes?
Certainly, Senator. That is correct.
Is it also wrong to duck a case for political purposes?
Senator, considerations related to politics should play no role in enforcement or prosecutorial decision-making.
So there's room for misuse on both sides. It would be wrong to pursue a case for political reasons, and it would be wrong to duck a proper case for political reasons also, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Did did you read Judge Gleason's brief in the Flynn case?
I am familiar with the brief, Senator.
Would you read it before I vote for you?
Certainly, Senator.
Great, thank you. Ms. Milgram, in Rhode Island, we have integrated peer recovery specialists into law enforcement. Sometimes they ride along, sometimes they follow up. It has been an enormously successful program that many of our police departments have not only come to participate in, but come to love. Handling the mic, could they please deal with that? Like turn down my volume? May I hold the time while we fix this? How are we feeling? Well, let me try again. Can you hear me? I think my mic is off now. All right. Hello? Off. You get a pause while we sort out the microphones. Okay. Am I back yet? No.
Can you all hear that?
This microphone is not working.
Are we back?
No.
Are we back? All right. Well, what I'm told is that we are audible online, but maybe not through the speakers in the room. So I will just try to speak loudly enough that we can hear each other across the gap. So I mentioned this integration of peer recovery specialists into law enforcement. As DEA administrator, how would you respond to that kind of initiative?
So, Senator, I really appreciate the question and the work that you're doing in your state. When I did work around reducing violence in the city of Camden, many years later, we went back to look at the overlap of health and crime in the city. We did a study and we found that 67% of the individuals who were frequent users of the healthcare system were also frequent users of the criminal justice system. And underlying that is substance abuse, mental health, and homelessness. So I very much agree with you that we have separated in many ways law enforcement from public health, but that if we want to have the safest communities we need to be thoughtful about addressing many of these things.
So while DEA is an enforcement agency, you would support the integration of peer recovery and addiction workers into law enforcement's work.
Senator, I've spent the better part of the past 3 years at NYU working with law enforcement, with the Indianapolis Police Department and with McLean County, Illinois, to build a screening tool for law enforcement to be able to identify individuals suffering from substance abuse and mental health. And so if I'm confirmed, I would very much look forward to working with you and others to address the overlap of health and crime. And I would look forward to that
Senator
opportunity.
Cornyn and I are working on legislation to expand what's happening with respect to peer recovery integration into a larger behavioral health and crisis intervention integration with law enforcement. Would you support those initiatives as well?
Senator, I would very much look forward to working with you and Senator Cornyn on these. The question in my mind, just to put it very basically, is how do we make our communities safer and healthier? And to me, anything that can get us there are things that, are things that we should be pursuing.
And
I didn't mean to scream. I apologize.
No, I think they just turned the speakers back on. That's why that happened. Would you also comment on how important it is for DEA to look at the money side of the international narcotics trafficking industry as opposed to just the drug supply side?
Yes, Senator. There's no question that one of the core missions of DEA is to dismantle the most significant individuals and organizations that are engaged in narcotics trafficking. And a significant aspect of that is following the money, looking at whether it's money laundering or other financial transactions that are happening not just in the United States, but also around the world. I'm grateful for the leadership you've had on this issue, and I would also look forward to working on that with you and other members of the committee.
Good, thank you. As the chair of the International Narcotics Trafficking Caucus, I want to focus in this area, and we look forward to working with you. Finally, Mr. Chipman, can you think of any position that you have taken regarding firearms that you would pursue at ATF that is out of step with majority views of the American public?
Senator, thank you for that question, and the answer is no.
And let me just take a second as I close out. I think I actually got a little extra time as we switched the clock because of the microphone, so I'll end. But I do want to express my appreciation to Chairman Leahy for his work on gun tracing. As a U.S. attorney and as my state's attorney general, we really tried to focus on getting information to investigators as quickly as possible from crime scenes and to be able to trace back where guns and ballistics shells, for instance, came from so that you could, in real time, be working on preventing further crimes. And we are long overdue getting that problem fixed. And I just wanted to express my appreciation to Senator Leahy for his work on this, and he is well supported in the caucus trying to make sure that we get this done. So thank you. Look forward to working with you on this ballistics and gun tracing side.
Thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chipman, a minute ago, Senator Whitehouse asked you if any of your views on guns are out of step with the majority of the American people. The AR-15 is one of, if not the most popular rifle in America. It's not a machine gun. It's a rifle. Your public position is that you want to ban AR-15s. Is that correct?
Senator, thank you for the question, and thank you for our visit yesterday and offering me a Dr. Pepper. It made me reminisce about my time in Central Texas. But now to your question. With respect to the AR-15, I support a ban as has been presented in a Senate bill and supported by the President. The AR-15 is a gun I was issued on ATF's SWAT team, and it's a particularly lethal weapon. And regulating it as other particularly lethal weapons, I have advocated for. As ATF director, if I'm confirmed, I would simply enforce the laws on the books, and right now, there is no such ban on those guns.
So you want to ban the most popular rifle in America. A minute ago, and you noted there is a Senate bill. Senator Feinstein had a bill to ban some 2,000 specified rifles and other firearms in her bill. In 2013, the Democrats had a majority in the Senate. It was the Harry Reid Senate. And we voted on the Senate floor on Senator Feinstein's so-called assault weapon ban. Do you know how many senators voted for it?
No, I do not.
40. 60 voted against it. So in a Democratic Senate, a supermajority voted against a ban. Now, part of the reason they voted against the ban, as you're aware, is during the Clinton administration, there was a ban in effect. The Department of Justice studied the effect of that law and discovered that it had no measurable impact on violent crime. Is that right?
Senator, I did enforce this law for 10 years as an ATF agent. I'm unfamiliar with the study that you are pointing out, and I apologize for that.
Well, when you and I met in my office last night and discussed it, I asked if there were any data to suggest that the ban was effective, and what you said in the office is you were not aware of any data, that the data was, I think, mixed is the term you used.
Yeah, yes, Senator. What I said to you yesterday, you've accurately stated it. I think it was mixed, which, I stand by that remark. And I think my recollection is that evidence was shown that the limitation on magazine size had an impact. I also believe that later studies showed that the use of assault weapons in mass shootings had declined during that period. But that's how I would like to characterize my views on that.
So you also said when you and I talked yesterday in the office that Senator Feinstein's bill, which a supermajority of senators voted against in a Democratic Senate, you said that bill didn't go far enough and you wanted an even broader ban to ban. You said it didn't go far enough. Is that right?
Senator, thanks for that question and the ability to clarify. What I did say is that Senator Feinstein's bill did not address those firearms that are currently in the possession of Americans. And then I did share with you my view as an advocate, which would be quite different than someone actually enforcing the law in the books, that those firearms could be treated under the NFA and regulated that way, which would deal with those currently in the possession of Americans.
So when you say it didn't go far enough, you mean that you don't just want to ban the manufacturer of those rifles, you don't just want to make it illegal to sell those rifles, but you want to actively have government go after the people who currently possess firearms, and if they don't register and submit to all of the onerous restrictions of the National Firearms Act, presumably confiscate their weapons?
Senator, what I've said publicly is that as an advocate, I prefer a system where the AR-15 and other assault weapons are regulated under the National Firearms Act.
Let me shift to Ms. Jaddou. You and I also had a conversation this week. Do you consider so-called birth tourism to be a problem?
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me yesterday. I really appreciated that. We did have a quite fruitful discussion on that issue, and I believe we ended with the thought that we need to collect some information, and the data is not there. I also noted that as a mother and as someone who's been through quite a difficult delivery, the incredible interest in protecting the health of a mother, the health of a new baby, and ensuring that we could do the best we can so that women and their babies are protected.
Ms. Jaddou, with all respect, I don't find that answer remotely credible. And you said in my office you didn't consider birth tourism an 8-month pregnant or 9-month pregnant woman getting a tourist visa to come to America to have a child on American soil so that child is an American citizen, that you didn't consider it an abuse of our laws. It's an obvious and transparent abuse of the laws. I will point out last December, federal prosecutors indicted 6 people running a birth tourism operation in Long Island where Turkish women would pay between $7,500 and $10,000 to travel to New York on tourist visas to give birth and return to Turkey with American citizen babies. And in 2019, the New York Times referred to the birth tourism industry as, quote, thriving. Is it your position that this doesn't occur, that the New York Times was wrong, that there's not a blatant abuse of our immigration system?
To the extent that anybody is committing fraud or assisting in anybody committing fraud or misrepresentation, that has not only makes someone inadmissible to the United States, but also there are criminal penalties. And I understand, I'm not familiar with the case you just mentioned, but I'm familiar with other ones that a sister agency inside the Department of Homeland Security in the past, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has addressed.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to all the nominees. I think I'll start with you, Mr. Polite, down there. You were appointed by a Republican Louisiana governor to serve on the Louisiana Civil Service Commission and currently have the support of Louisiana's Republican Attorney General, who praised you for being not only an effective crime fighter, but also an invaluable member of the community. In your view, how have you earned that support, and how do you work together? I always think of prosecutors when I have my old job as ministers of justice, that you have to, of course, focus on community safety and convicting the guilty, but also protecting the innocent, which to me also involves things like conviction, integrity units, drug courts, and the like. So if you want to briefly respond.
Senator, thank you so much for that question. And my view is very similar to what you articulated, Senator, that my role as a U.S. attorney, while certainly focused on issues of enforcement, was much broader than that. It was to be a community problem solver. And so to utilize all of the tools at our disposal, not just enforcement, but tools such as prevention and intervention and even reentry, particularly in a state like Louisiana where incarceration rates were so high. All of those tools were critical to our work, and it required outreach to many different components within our communities, across state, local, and federal law enforcement, but also outside of government to actually achieve those goals.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Chipman, it's not lost on me that as we're having this discussion with you, or several members are, about guns, that there is another mass shooting with fatalities near San Jose. We have worked hard. There are Republicans like Senator Toomey that have worked on the background check issue and tried to get that done. We know the vast majority of Americans support rational gun violence legislation. And a piece of this is for many years I've led the legislation to close a dangerous loophole in the law that allows domestic abusers to buy a gun simply because they're not married to their victims. This bill actually was included in the Violence Against Women Act over in the House and got a number of Republicans voting for it. And it's something that I think we can advance. Could you comment about that? Do you agree that we should keep guns out of the hands of all convicted domestic abusers?
Thank you, Senator, for this question, and thank you for your dedication to domestic violence, which remains the most dangerous call police will ever respond to. As an ATF agent in Central Texas, one of the most significant cases I worked was a pipe bomb sent by an estranged boyfriend to a woman who worked at a probation and parole office. So domestic violence is something that ATF agents regularly deal with on the job, and there's no greater threat than those offenders who have access to a gun. So it would be one of the top priorities I had if I am confirmed as ATF director.
Very good. Thank you very much. Ms. Milgram, I enjoyed our discussion, and we talked about opioids, something that I've been working on for quite a while with a number of Republicans on this committee as well as Democrats. What do you see DEA's role? We talked about the documents from a recent trial showing drug manufacturers mocking what they called hillbillies in West Virginia. I do suggest, I know there's shared belief on this issue, but this mocking of the Beverly Hillbillies song, where drug executives were actually put in words mocking the people they got hooked on the drugs, was an outrageous thing I'd never seen until last week, and it just shows how heartless this addiction was, where people were profiting off of people's own addictions, many times resulting in death. could you quickly address what the DAA you see as the priorities?
Senator, I share your concern on this issue. America is in the midst of an opioid crisis, and fentanyl, which has now come to our cities and streets, is really fueling this addiction opioid crisis today. But I share your concern that there are two pieces of it. First, it's the pharmaceutical companies and the manufacturers and others that have essentially put us in a situation today where we must regulate opioids and the prescription drugs that people are being given. So there's a huge function in the DEA's diversion work that is a part of that, and it will be a priority for me. The other piece is really stopping the illicit fentanyl from coming into our country, where individuals who, most of whom first become hooked through prescription drugs, are then turning to heroin, to illicit fentanyl, and to other substances, and we're seeing just way too many overdose deaths in our country.
Okay, thank you. Last, Ms. Jaddou, I really enjoyed our conversation as well. We talked about the fact that for so many of us in our states where we have needs for immigrant workers, permanent workers, temporary workers, and the like, this is becoming a near crisis, especially in northern Minnesota in our tourism industry, in some of our farmlands and others. We also rely on all levels of education from immigrants that are part of our economy. And one of those is in medical. And yesterday, Senator Collins, Rosen, Ernst, and I introduced a bipartisan bill that I've long been leading. I took it over from Senator Conrad when he left, the Conrad State 30 and Physician Access Act, which increases the number of international doctors trained in the U.S. to remain in the country if they practice in rural or underserved areas. I remind people that more than 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born abroad, and 70 of America's Fortune 500 companies were started by people born in other countries. How can CIS help to ensure we are attracting talent to come to our country at all levels and work with us on this really a crisis of not having enough doctors in underserved areas? One of the reasons you see Senator Collins and Senator Ernst join me on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciated the time talking with you yesterday and when we talked about this issue. As you know, I worked on it when I was a Hill staffer back in the day on the House side, and I completely appreciate and understand this issue. And a family member, my father-in-law, came through a program, a little different, but somewhat similar, to assist in the U.S. Navy. So I can personally appreciate the program. Professionally from USCIS, what we can do is to ensure that the processing of the applications surrounding that is not something that is slowing down the process, that we are doing it efficiently and in an accessible manner, and of course to ensure the integrity and security of the system.
Excellent. Thank you all for your pointed and brief answer so I could get all my questions in. I appreciate it.
And the patience of your chairman.
Patience of our chairman, yes.
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Mr. Chipman, if I could just start with you. Since leaving the ATF, you've served as a policy advisor or provided support for, I think, just about every national gun control group in the country or close to it: the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and most recently the Giffords Group. My question is, given your policy bias, and you clearly have a very distinct policy point of view, you alluded to this with Senator Cruz a moment ago, how can America's hundreds of millions of law-abiding gun owners have confidence that you won't try to restrict their Second Amendment rights if you're confirmed as ATF director? I mean, what assurances can you give them that you will limit your efforts to criminals who misuse weapons and leave law-abiding firearms owners to themselves?
Senator, thank you for this question because it's really important. As I've said, for 25 years, I enforced the law on the books. Every day, me and other federal agents tried to catch the bad guys. I mean, that's what the mission was. It was trying to keep the public safe. During those 25 years, I saw gaps in the law that really prevented us from doing the job I knew the American public wanted us to do. Look at that 25 years. I was not going wayward with law-abiding gun owners. I never received a complaint of that sort. And I'm prepared to return to that job. But my passion after leaving ATF was to make ATF and our enforcement of gun laws more effective to keep us all safe. I understand if I'm confirmed, I will have to earn the confidence and your respect and trust to keep doing that.
Let me ask you about some of your work for the Giffords Group. In the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case, District of Columbia versus Heller, which was handed down when I was actually working at the U.S. Supreme Court, the Giffords Law Center that year, if memory serves, authored an amicus brief arguing that there is no individual right to own a firearm under the Second Amendment. The Supreme Court famously found otherwise. Do you share your employer's belief that the Second Amendment does not protect an individual right to keep and bear firearms?
Thank you for your question, Senator. I do not. I'm a gun owner. I respect that the Supreme Court has recognized this right. And if ATF director, I will ensure to uphold that right.
Very good. So you think Heller was rightly decided, just to be clear about this?
Senator, I'm a cop, not a lawyer. What I know is the law is the law, and the Supreme Court plays a role in recognizing what those rights are. As an agent, I felt like we were going down a highway. Our mission was to prevent crime, and the Constitution were those guardrails to keep us in line. And at times, when the road was uncertain, we had signposts, and those were attorneys who we asked advice and counsel. And so if confirmed as ATF director, that's the balance that I would strike. But the bottom line is our job is to prevent crimes from apparently that is ongoing right now that other members have suggested, and that would be my sole duty.
Well, I just want to be clear on this because you said that you do think that the Constitution supports, protects the individual right to keep and bear arms. That was the holding of Heller. You've been a policy advocate now for quite a number of years, and I think that your views, and you've discussed some of them today, are fair game. So I just want to be clear on this. You think Heller was rightly decided. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful. Let me ask you about something you said in 2012. In an interview, I think it was on MSNBC, you said that the Secret Service should not carry guns. You said their whole rule is to cover and evacuate, and you went on to say possibly we need to think of strategies like that in schools. Is that still your view?
Senator, I trust that you have and your staff have actually picked something I've said. I do not believe I ever said that. I might have said this, which is I was trained to work with the Secret Service, and I have observed that part of that training is that you have to get your body in between you and the person you're protecting, and you often don't have the opportunity to even draw your gun. That is something that I would say. I have never advocated that the Secret Service should not carry guns, ever.
Did you mean to suggest then that schools should have unarmed guards, that they shouldn't be able to protect students with firearms? I mean, I'm trying to understand the import of your comments.
Senator, thank you for the question about schools. I mean, this is something that we've all debated and tried to figure out a solution to the mass violence we've seen in schools. We know how to keep buildings safe. I came in one today. I do not believe that the best approach is to arm people to win gunfights in schools.
So you're opposed then to having armed guards in schools? You think that they shouldn't be armed?
As an advocate and as a firearms expert, I've rendered my opinion that I believe that there are better ways to secure schools. If I'm confirmed as ATF director, largely this is not going to be the focus of ATF. Our focus would be to prevent people who would do harm at schools from ever getting guns in the first place. Hopefully that addresses the question as you've asked.
Wouldn't that just leave the guards who are there, the law enforcement who are there, to act as human shields? I mean, is that essentially your view?
Senator, no, it's not, and I'm sorry if I'm not explaining this correctly. We came into a building today secured so that guns would not be brought in. I'm more a believer of hardening targets so that guns could never enter a school. So that armed people inside would not be faced with other armed people. So, metal detectors is something used in some schools, and I've suggested that that's a possible, view that states and localities will have to make for themselves.
I do have some additional questions for you, which I'm happy to give to you for the record, as well as we'll give to you for the record your comments in that 2012 interview that I referred to, and give you a chance to follow up more fully on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hawley. Senator Cotton. I'm sorry, Senator Blumenthal, then Senator Cotton.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to pursue the line of questioning, Mr. Shipman, that you just finished with my colleague, Senator Hawley, because I think you said something very telling, and it ought to be compelling to this committee and to the United States Senate. You said, I'm a cop, not a lawyer. And as the head of ATF, you'd be the top cop in that agency, which has agents who enforce the law just like cops do. You wouldn't be making law, would you? You'd be enforcing it.
No, I'd be enforcing it, and I'd be relying on attorneys, as I did through my entire career, if that road became uncertain. That's just standard practice.
And in 25 years as an agent at the ATF, you liked some of your targets, maybe personally, and you didn't like others. You thought some laws were really good and maybe didn't like others, but you enforced them against people without fear or favor, correct?
In some ways, it's easy. You enforce the law on the books. There's not, and you want to do it safely, and you want to keep yourself safe.
And the President of the United States has issued a proposed regulation dealing with ghost guns that, in effect, would require that all firearms have serial numbers. I strongly support it. I've introduced legislation that would ban ghost guns, as they're called, that lack serial numbers. In a hearing that I recently held in my subcommittee on the Constitution, not mine, I chair it, the following fact was disclosed. Between January 1, 2016 and March 4, 2021, ATF attempted to trace almost 23,946 ghost guns, but only 151 traces could be completed. That's less than 1%. What happens in investigations when guns can't be traced?
Thank you for this question, Senator. What happens is it makes the case very difficult to solve. We can rely on other technologies to help, but certainly tracing the serial number of a product is critical. It's how we solved the World Trade Center bombing and the Oklahoma City bombing. So it's absolutely essential to law enforcement to be able to trace a gun.
There's nothing ghost-like about ghost guns. They look like guns, they shoot like guns, they kill like guns. They are guns. And in my home state of Connecticut, we've banned ghost guns, but the law of one state really can't protect the citizens of that state because guns can be brought from other states, and now people can actually assemble these guns in their homes, make them out of plastic on machines. In your experience, is the serialization of firearms the same as a gun registry? Because I know some of my colleagues and some people are very fearful that the serialization of guns, which is now a requirement on all guns owned by licensed manufacturers, will be turned into some kind of national registry. That isn't true, is it?
No, Senator. It was clear as an ATF agent that such a registry is prohibited by law. The only registry that exists is in the National Firearms Act. The bottom line is that serial number, even before ghost guns, was something that criminals would try to remove, especially firearms traffickers, and so this is a real threat to firearms trafficking.
Thank you. Ms. Jaddou, you and I had a wonderful conversation, and I want to just commend to my colleagues your personal story, your mom and dad, your entire family is really a model of what citizenship should mean in this country, the way you've contributed and your entire family. I want to focus on the use of parole powers, which you and I discussed briefly. There are about 3.5 million people in the family-based visa backlog and hundreds of thousands more in the employment-based visa backlog. This problem is now completely out of hand. It's a disgrace to this country, and I know this administration didn't create it, but I'm hoping that you will address it. I've spoken to you previously about recapturing unused visas, which I hope you will explore, and to circumvent the visa backlog problems. Congress specifically granted DHS the authority to grant parole on the basis of urgent humanitarian need or significant public benefit, as you know. It seems reasonable that the reunion of families who have an approved immigrant visa petition but who are stuck, literally just stuck, waiting for a visa to become available is an urgent humanitarian need. So I would like to ask you, would you consider creating a parole program for children and spouses of those with approved visa petitions? Such a step would have enormously beneficial consequences to thousands of people.
Thank you, Senator, and I especially appreciated the time talking with you. It was extremely enjoyable and getting to know you. So with regard to your question, that is certainly something I would like to take a look at if I'm confirmed. Of course, it would require reviewing the parole provision with regard to the individuals you're mentioning and to determine whether the law allows for such facts. And that would something I'd be happy to work with you in your office on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And now, Senator Cotton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to add my voice to the objections raised by Senator Cornyn and Senator Lee about scheduling a panel with 5 witnesses, one of which is a lifetime judicial appointment, the other 4 of which are very important appointments to the executive branch.
Senator, would you allow me to respond and not at the expense of your time?
Please.
Senator, in the last Congress, on the following occasions, we had 1 court nominee followed by a second panel with 5 nominees, judicial and executive nominees. October 4th, 2017, December 13th, 2017, May 9th, 2018, June 6th, 2018, August 22nd, 2018, October 17th, 2018, May 22nd, 2019, December 4th, 2019. These panels included lifetime appointees, and as you can see, in 8 different occasions under Republican leadership, they had exactly the same format as today.
No time like the president to change our ways. And since, as a new member of the committee, I'm observing that I don't think that we should have 4 important executive branch nominees in front of us at a time. But thank you. Mr. Chipman, you testified to Senator Lee that it's a serious felony to lie on a background check application. I agree. The ATF form 4473 asks, are you an unlawful user of or addicted to any drug or uncontrolled substance? If an applicant checks yes, they cannot purchase a firearm. On March 25th, Politico reported that Hunter Biden, President Biden's son, applied for a handgun that was later thrown in the trash and had to be recovered by Secret Service agents in 2018. Politico reported that Hunter Biden completed this background check and answered no to the question of whether he was an unlawful user of or addicted to any drug. Hunter Biden has since published a book and gone on a nationwide book tour, conducting numerous interviews, stating that he was, in fact, very much addicted to drugs at the same time that he purchased this firearm. This would mean that by his own admission, Hunter Biden lied on that form and, by your earlier testimony, committed a serious felony. Should Hunter Biden be prosecuted for breaking this law?
Senator, thank you for your question. If I'm confirmed as ATF director, it will be my responsibility to enforce all federal laws without political favor. I do not know any factors in this particular case, but I am familiar with the press account of it.
Well, my understanding is the statute of limitation is only 5 years, and that this happened in 2018. Mr. Biden is obligated to keep a record of that form for up to 5 years himself. So this should be a fairly easy case to investigate. Can I get your commitment that if you are confirmed, you will in fact look into this matter and refer it for prosecution if you find that Hunter Biden violated the law?
Senator, what I will assure you is that if ATF director, I will ensure that all violations of law are investigated and referred. I'm not sure that it has not been investigated.
Well, I hope it has, and if the facts are as clear-cut as they appear to be, based on Mr. Biden's own admission, I would expect to see criminal charges forthcoming. But I would say that when a case is as high profile as this, if there is not an answer for the American people and public, it severely undermines the confidence in our gun laws, as well as the ATF and the Department of Justice, if there are not criminal consequences. I want to turn to a second matter now, Mr. Chipman. You have called for an assault weapons ban. I have a simple question for you. What is an assault weapon?
Senator, an assault weapon would be, in the context of the question you asked, what Congress defines it as.
So you're asking us to ban assault weapons. We have to write legislation. Can you tell me what is an assault weapon? How would you define it if you were the head of the ATF? How have you defined it over the last several years as your role as a gun control advocate?
Senator, if I'm confirmed as ATF director, my recollection is the only process by which ATF has weighed in is that I know there's a demand letter 3 program, which requires multiple reports, multiple sale reports on the southwestern border. And ATF in that program has defined an assault rifle as any semi-automatic rifle capable of accepting a detachable magazine above the caliber of .22, which would include a .223, which is, largely the AR-15 round.
So you believe that every weapon that takes a detachable magazine that can take a .22 round or 5.56 in the military parlance should be defined as an assault weapon?
Let me clarify. What I believe I just said is any semi-automatic rifle.
Okay, any semi-automatic rifle.
What?
That's the definition. A detachable magazine that takes a 5.56 or .22 round should be defined as an assault weapon.
Senator, you asked me if ATF had used this term, and I was sharing with you my knowledge of a program in which ATF has defined this term. And it is in the Demand Letter 3 program, and that rifle is a semi-automatic rifle capable of accepting a detachable magazine with a round greater than a .22 caliber. And in those cases, firearms dealers on the southwest border are required to make a multiple sale report to ATF.
I'm amazed that that might be the definition of assault weapon. That would basically cover every single modern sporting rifle in America today. Let me put it this way. If I wanted to buy an assault weapon, and I walked into Walmart or Cabela's or some other firearm dealers, and I looked up on the wall where they were labeling their weapons, would there be a label on the wall for assault weapon?
I don't believe, Senator, and thank you for this question, that the firearms industry has used the term assault rifle in their marketing since there was a ban on it. It was after that they changed their use of the term assault rifle to the modern sporting rifle.
Well, so I've been in Walmarts and I've been in Cabela's, and I've seen that you can find sections for pistols or handguns or for shotguns or for rifles because those are actual kinds of firearms. I think our exchange here illustrates that there really is no such thing as an assault weapon. That is a term that was manufactured by liberal lawyers and pollsters in Washington to try to scare the American people into believing that the government should confiscate weapons that are wildly popular for millions of Americans to defend themselves and their families and their homes.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask the panel to respond to my 2 initial questions en masse. First question, since you became a legal adult, have any of you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature? Everybody on the panel, please.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Thank you.
No,
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No,
No,
Senator.
Senator.
This is a question for Ms. Milgram. We all know that our country is in the throes of an opioid crisis. I would like to point out that Hawaii continues to be plagued by meth, and Honolulu actually just set a 5-year high for drug-related deaths with 197 such deaths in 2020, and this was largely driven by meth overdoses. I know that you are going to be very focused on the opioid crisis, and I'm glad that you mentioned that there is an overlap of health and behavioral health aspects to this addiction, but I hope that you will also allocate DA resources to ensure that issues like the meth problem in Hawaii do not get short shrift as the agency focuses on the opioid crisis.
Senator, thank you. Thank you for that question. And I share your concern about methamphetamine. In the United States, there are large quantities of methamphetamine and other narcotics coming across borders, being shipped by mail. And so this is a critical aspect, and it's part of the core mission of the DEA. So you have my assurance that if I'm confirmed, that it will continue to be part of that core mission.
Thank you. Ms. Jaddou, I'm glad that we had a chance to talk briefly. And you mentioned in our discussion, and you also said today that the heart of the immigration system is the processing of applications. And there is a huge backlog on the processing of various kinds of applications where sometimes people have to wait months and months for applications to be processed. So I would like to have your commitment, as you did in our discussion, that this will be one of the first areas that you will address, because you do consider the processing of applications to be at the heart of what USCIS does.
Thank you so much, Senator, and I really appreciate the time we had together. You absolutely have my commitment on that. It is my top priority.
You have been with the USCIS during the Obama administration, and why are you choosing to return to an office that you have been before?
Thank you, Senator. I understand the intrinsic value of a functioning legal immigration processing agency, and that's what USCIS does. I have been on the Hill. I have taken those phone calls from constituents. I have seen it myself in my life. At USCIS, when I was chief counsel, I saw that the simple act of opening an envelope with an application can create backlogs if not done well. And I also understand that partner agencies are really important to the process. So I look forward to using the relationships and the knowledge that I have already gained in my time working on the Hill and at USCIS to now convert it into working as the director of the agency.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just as Ms. Jaddou, you are going back to an agency with which you have a lot of experience. So how do you think the experience of your previous experience with ATF will help you in your role as director?
Thank you for that question. It's a great question. Much of that experience, I was an agent, and I know what it takes to do that job, so I think I'll be able to connect with the employees that I would lead. But I also know how important it is for a leader to be accountable, and that's what I want to be for the troops.
You've been asked a number of questions about whether or not, obviously you have been an advocate for sensible gun safety legislation, but I just want to note for the record that, of course, you will be enforcing the law. So you'll be following the law, something that I wish some people in the previous administration also did. So when we look at the issue of gun violence, and even as we speak, there is a mass shooting apparently happening in California, that there are those among us who think that the way to deal with the scourge of gun violence in our country is to enable ever more guns in our country. And Mr. Chapman, while I don't expect you to weigh in on that point, it is very clear, is it not, that there's nothing in the Constitution that prevents Congress or the states from enacting gun ownership, sensible gun ownership laws? Is there?
Senator, I think that it is well within the powers of Congress to balance the rights we have under the Constitution and the responsibility as a nation to keep us safe.
Well, and while the Supreme Court did decide in Heller, there are a lot of us who do not agree with that particular Supreme Court decision. My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin. I don't have any questions for him, but I want to give a shout out to my friend, Mr. Polite, who served honorably and well as a United States attorney in Louisiana. And I'm going to vote for him. And I want to thank him for his willingness to serve. I don't know how he talked his spouse into it. He's given up major dollars to come back in the government service, but I am grateful that he is willing to do so.
Thank you for your support, Senator.
Ms. Strickland, Counselor, you do not believe in qualified immunity for law enforcement officials, do you?
Thank you for the question, Senator. For much of my career, I have served on the board of the New Mexico Criminal Defense Lawyers.
Yes, ma'am. But see, my time is so limited. You don't believe in qualified immunity for law enforcement officials, do you?
So on behalf of organizations and associations that I've been in, we have taken the position that New Mexico, who is considering its own civil rights bill, should not.
Let me ask you again. Do you believe in qualified immunity for law enforcement officials?
So
you personally?
Well, any personal views that I have on it would not come into consideration if I were to be confirmed as a judge.
Oh, sure they will. Sure they will. If you're confirmed, you're going to do everything you can to undermine qualified immunity, aren't you?
No, Senator. Qualified immunity is the law of the land. It is the law of the Supreme Court. It is the law of the 10th Circuit, and I would apply.
Well, you spent your entire adult career arguing against qualified immunity, haven't you?
Well, I have spent my time as an advocate working underneath qualified immunity, where I did not argue against qualified immunity. I worked within the bounds of qualified immunity. And on behalf of associations...
Yeah, but you don't believe in it. It's okay. I mean, this is America. You can believe what you want. But I don't want to be misled here. You don't believe in qualified immunity, do you?
I do believe, Senator, in qualified immunity. It is the law of this country. It is a law of...
Well, then why did you help New Mexico? Why did you work so hard to get New Mexico to change it?
Well, New Mexico was considering a new bill regarding civil rights, and it was trying to decide whether qualified immunity should apply to a new...
I understand. I'm not trying to cut you off. I really hate being rude like this and interrupting folks. We have so little time. Here's what I want to ask you. I want you to answer this one for me in front of God and country. If you personally were queen for a day, and you could make any policy you wanted to right now, and you had the ability to get rid of qualified immunity for law enforcement officials by just sweeping your hand, you're telling me you wouldn't do it?
Yes, Senator. Qualified immunity...
You wouldn't do it?
I would not. Qualified immunity...
All right, let me ask you a question of Mr. Chipman. Where's Mr. Chipman? You're nominated for alcohol, tobacco, and firearms and explosives and all kind of other dangerous stuff. Is that right?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. You don't believe in private ownership of handguns, do you?
That's incorrect. I own one myself.
Do you? Do you believe in private ownership of assault weapons?
Yes,
what do you own, by the way?
That's a pretty private question. I have I'll share the gun I'm proudest of. It's a Smith & Wesson Treasury commemorative gun, and the serial number is my birth date.
Oh, that's cool. Congratulations. Do you believe in banning assault weapons?
I do, sir.
Okay. Define assault weapons.
Assault weapons would be something that members of Congress would define.
Well, how do you define it? You're going to be running the agency.
Senator, I think this is a good question. If I am confirmed as ATF director,
I got 35 seconds left. Define it for me, would you please, sir? What's an assault weapon?
Yeah, Senator, the bill to ban assault weapons is
what is your
dozens of
definition of an
pages.
assault
There's no way I could define an assault weapon.
You don't have any, you're going to run this agency and you don't have a definition of assault weapon?
But I would be enforcing the definition that members
Yeah,
of
but
Congress
you're going to be
passed.
issuing rules and regulations. Just give me your definition.
I'll give you one definition that ATF
Give me your
currently
definition.
uses. One definition that ATF currently
Give me your definition.
I can give you one definition.
If you won't
that ATF
answer my
currently
question, how can I vote for you? I'm done, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I'm going to get an answer.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. I yield myself 5 minutes to question. Oh, pardon me, Senator Coons, you want to go ahead? Okay. Yield myself 5 minutes, and I thank the panel. Thank you for your willingness to serve. Thank you for putting yourself through this process. I'd like to begin with you, Mr. Chipman. Much of in fact, the majority of homicides involving firearms involve handguns. Is that correct?
That's correct. And thank you for the question, Senator.
What steps do you intend to take, should you be confirmed, to stop the proliferation of illegal handguns and reduce the level of gun violence involving handguns on American streets?
Thank you, Senator. The top priority of ATF will be a focus on firearms trafficking by focusing on the illegal transfer of guns from lawful commerce into illegal commerce, the selling and illegal dealing of guns to criminals is the best way to prevent crime with guns. The ultimate responsibility of ATF is to do what is within our powers to prevent those offenders from ever getting a handgun if they can't lawfully possess it in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Chipman. And this is a question for both you and Ms. Milgram, please. We've seen a significant increase in violent crime across the country over the last year. In the city of Atlanta, for example, homicide has increased 60% year over year. I was recently out at a park in my neighborhood with my wife and dear friends celebrating our friend's son's one-year-old birthday party, and gunfire erupted at that park. A group of young people who had been fighting moved several blocks west throughout the afternoon. Gunfire erupted again. 15-year-old girl was killed, 2 young people wounded. Will each of you, Mr. Chipman and Ms. Milgram, please commit to joining me in Georgia, should you be confirmed, to meet with leaders in local and state law enforcement, as well as community leaders, the Atlanta Police Department, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office, to discuss how we can tackle and reverse this disturbing trend of increased violent crime and homicide that's taking lives and doing grievous harm to so many families?
Yes, Senator. I'd be delighted to join you if I'm confirmed.
Thank you, Ms. Milgram. Mr. Chipman?
Yes, Senator. I'd welcome the opportunity to visit Atlanta, visit our Atlanta Field Division, and visit ATF's critical lab that's located there.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you a similar question about 2 other areas of my state that have seen comparable significant increases in violent crime over the last year. The city of Savannah is experiencing an outbreak of homicides and shootings at levels not seen in 3 or 4 years. Last fall in Savannah, violence escalated from on average a shooting every 3 days to one every other day. Will you similarly please commit to joining me to meet with Savannah's political leadership, Mayor Van Johnson, the Savannah Police Department, and the Chatham County Sheriff's Office to discuss how to reduce violent crime in and around Savannah, Georgia?
Senator, I would commit to you that I believe that violence is critically important that we address it. And if I'm confirmed, I'm happy to assist you in any way with any meetings or otherwise, and any other members of this committee in any way that I can.
Thank you. Mr. Chipman?
Senator, thank you very much for the opportunity to again go to your state and meet with local law enforcement, which is ATF's role to support in their efforts to prevent violent crime.
It is indeed. And so, Mr. Chipman, in the same vein, I'd like to also ask you if you'll please make the same commitment to meet with me and the leadership of Augusta's Police Department, the Richmond County Sheriff's Office, and leaders in and around Augusta, Georgia, to discuss similarly increasing rate of violent crime in the Augusta area?
Senator, I agree that I will commit to that visit, and it'll be nice to visit a place of Georgia I have never visited.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your willingness to serve. Thank you again for putting yourselves through this process. Senator Blackburn's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And to our witnesses, thank you for bearing with us today as we have been in and out. Mr. Chipman, I'm going to come to you. There's been a lot said about your affiliations and the organizations and how that might influence your work at the ATF. And one of the things that I hear from Tennesseans is they want the ATF to be going after criminals, not after law-abiding gun owners. So how would you execute that?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you also for spending the time on the phone with me earlier so we could meet. I think the perfect example of how Tennesseans should expect ATF to respond is how we responded to your city that was bombed on Christmas. We will always be there in the worst hours to determine who committed a crime and bring them to justice if we can. We will always be focused on criminals. That's what we do.
And I hope you appreciate why people are very concerned about your stance on the Second Amendment and are very concerned that you would be going after law-abiding gun owners. So let me ask you this. In the House Judiciary Committee hearing on 2019, you said, and I'm quoting you, simply reinstating the 90s era ban on assault weapons is not enough. So I want you to tell me what is enough in relation to this statement.
Thank you for the question. In that hearing, I was commenting on the fact that I had the opportunity to enforce the National Firearms Act for 24 years. That was an act that balanced the right of individuals to possess those firearms, but had a regulatory structure that I found kept them out of the hands of criminals, which is the ultimate goal of all Americans. I thought, and I expressed that belief at that time, that the National Firearms Act would be a proper way to balance the rights and responsibilities
So the National Firearms Act would be enough?
I believe that the National Firearms Act would be enough.
Let me ask you this, because in the same hearing you continued, and this gets to the question that Senator Kennedy had for you, and I'm quoting you, instead, we should regulate a broader class of firearms, including assault weapons manufactured before the law's enactment. One option would be to require the registration of all existing assault weapons under the National Firearms Act while banning the future manufacture and sale of these firearms. So in these statements, you're talking about expanding the National Firearms Act, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that would not be enforcing it as it is written. That would be a change of policy. And then you would ban the future manufacture. That would be a change of policy. Banning the sale would be a change of policy. And in these statements, and going back to that hearing, you were referring to common semi-automatic firearms when you speak of assault weapons, correct?
Senator, in this hearing, I was acting as an advocate and was asked to propose solutions to complex problems.
And you were referring to semi-automatic weapons, correct?
Yes, Senator, but
yes,
as
thank you
Director
very
of
much.
AT...
Okay, Ms. Jaddou, I'd like to ask you a question, please, ma'am. We are quite concerned about some of the practices that have taken place under USCIS. During your time as the Chief Counsel at USCIS, the agency expanded the use of discretionary parole activity from a restricted case-by-case basis into a variety of new parole programs, such as International Entrepreneur Parole, the Filipino World War II Veterans Parole Program, and the Central American Minor Parole Program. Did this expanded use of discretionary parole through these new programs actually circumvent congressionally established immigration policy? And did USCIS exceed its authority under law created by Congress by admitting aliens who did not qualify for admission under normal and legal immigration categories?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for taking the time to
Absolutely.
meet with me
Yes,
on the phone.
I enjoyed
Thank you.
it.
Yes, I did too. Thank you. With regard to your question, we looked at the Immigration and Nationality Act, and I have worked with at the time, other attorneys in the agency as well, to determine if it fits within the structure of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And we did determine that, and therefore we proceeded.
So you feel that none of these programs went outside of the authority?
That was the determination we made at the time.
So why not just go by the law as written?
So the way the law is structured is there's a case-by-case determination.
Correct.
And those programs certainly set out guidelines for adjudicators, but nonetheless, every individual must apply, must submit an application, must be reviewed, have background checks. An adjudicator must review that application very carefully before they make a decision.
Well, I will tell you, this appears when you expand the use of discretionary parole authority and move away from a restricted case-by-case basis and put these new programs in place. The appearance of that is that you're making it easier to circumvent the law as written. And that is problematic. I know I'm over my time. I have a question for you on the Ban Birth Tourism Act, a piece of legislation that I introduced. I'm going to submit that to you for the record. I know that Senator Cruz asked you about that earlier and would appreciate your attention to that question.
Absolutely.
And I will say this, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jaddou, you have an adorable family, and your girls deserve all the ice cream that they want to eat this
We already
afternoon.
secretly promised them $2.
Because they have behaved beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
We give them the gold medal for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Senator Coons is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank our remarkable panel of nominees for your dedication, your willingness to serve, for all that you are going to bring to your service. Listening to your individual stories, to the journeys that brought you here, was inspiring to me. We stand at a moment when the American people are looking to us here in Washington, in the federal government, in the Biden administration, in the federal judiciary, here in Congress, to see their problems, to hear their concerns, and to actually deliver some meaningful solutions. So if I can, Ms. Strickland, I just wanted to ask you a quick question about the difference between an advocate and a judge and how you understand those different roles, and then I'm going to get into more law enforcement-related issues for our remaining nominees. Ms. Strickland?
Thank you for that question, Senator. As an advocate, my role was defined by the Sixth Amendment, to zealously work within the bounds of law and the best interests of my client, and I've had to try to do that over my career. The role of a judge is quite different. The role of the judge is also defined under the Constitution. The judge is to approach every case neutrally, with deliberately putting aside any personal opinions the judge might have in order to fairly consider the facts, the law, and the argument of counsel.
Well, thank you, Ms. Strickland. If I might also, Ms. Jaddou, USCIS, I've gotten a number of calls, as has my colleague, Senator Hirono, about the backlog for USCIS for fingerprinting, specifically in Delaware, which has put thousands of Delawareans' lives on hold, keeping them from visiting loved ones or getting jobs. USCIS has made some strides recently to address this and has cut the backlog in half, including by eliminating some unnecessary requirements imposed by the previous administration. Can you speak to how you will address these ongoing processing backlogs and commit to keeping me updated on the situation in my home state?
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for that question. This is exactly why I think this is the right moment for me in this job. I have been in that agency, and I understand those little minute steps can really create backlogs, time-sensitive backlogs. And I have seen it, so I could hit the ground running. I have built such wonderful relationships with the dedicated men and women at USCIS whom I admire tremendously, and I know I can work with them. And not just them, it's partner agencies as well, that we need to build strong working relationships. And I have a running start.
Well, I look forward to working with you in that context, and I know there's thousands of families in my state that are looking for some relief from these significant challenges. Mr. Chipman, if I might, Senator Cornyn and I have recently reintroduced a bill, the NICS Denial Notification Act, which would require federal authorities to notify state and local law enforcement when someone goes in, lies on their background check form, tries to buy the gun, and this is someone who's a person prohibited, so it's against the law for them to get that gun. Current law does not require any notice to local law enforcement. There were 100,000 federal background check denials in 2019. In some states, because the background check goes through state police, they get immediate notification, but in a majority of states, including mine, they don't. Can you help explain why it's an urgent warning sign when someone tries to buy a gun, fails their background check because they're lying, they're a convicted felon, say, and they're trying to get their hands on a gun? Why is this something we should take up and pass a bill to require notification to state and local law enforcement?
Senator, first, thank you for the question, and thanks for your dedication to this important issue. I view this as a near miss. In many professions, you study a near miss because you feel lucky that the bad thing didn't happen. If someone's willing to go into a gun store and lie and commit a federal felony, we shouldn't expect that it stops there because there are loopholes in the law. As ATF agents, it's our job to ensure that the information we have is in the hands of local police who might come across these people. So it's not only good policy, it's a way ATF can support local law enforcement and keep them safe.
Thank you. Now I'd like to ask about what we're going to be doing together to not just make law enforcement more transparent and more accountable, but to make law enforcement more effective. I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. You just heard from Senator Ossoff from Georgia concerns about a rise in violent crime in cities in his state, in Savannah and Augusta and Atlanta. In my hometown of Wilmington, despite the best efforts of our mayor and governor and our police department, we have seen a steady rise in violent gun crime. Mr. Polite, I understand from your testimony, you became interested in serving as a prosecutor when your own half-brother was murdered. And you've spent time clerking for Judge Ambrose, a personal friend on the Third Circuit, and serving in the Skadden Arps office in Wilmington, a place I was a summer associate. So you know a thing or two about my hometown. Mr. Chipman and Ms. Milgram, you're nominated to lead the ATF and DEA and to work alongside Mr. Polite, who will be leading, hopefully, DOJ Criminal Division. And all three of you have significant experience in law enforcement and have great experience in addressing violent crime in American cities. Ms. Milgram, you spoke about Camden and the work that you did. I'd be interested in hearing from each of you what role you see in coordinating between the ATF, DEA, and DOJ's criminal division to reduce violence in our communities. Whether you'll commit to staying engaged with me and with other members of this committee in the Senate as we work with our local communities to try and address and interrupt the ways in which drugs and guns and gangs and violence seem to be going together, and how you see this journey, should you be confirmed, of trying to bring more peace, more justice, and more order to our communities. If we could, in order, Mr. Chipman, Ms. Milgram, Mr. Polite.
Senator, first, yes, I commit to this collaborative approach. It's one I found effective at ATF, and I do believe that the ATF will have information and intelligence and techniques and technology that, when married with the ground truth that a local law enforcement agency has, that's a good pathway to preventing violent crime.
Ms. Milgram?
Thank you, Senator. I've had a job as a state chief law enforcement officer where a prior attorney general had taken over the police department of one of the most dangerous cities in America. So I understand this concern. And my belief is that One of the things we did there was we partnered with the DEA, we partnered with ATF, we partnered with other local law enforcement agencies and state agencies in order to do a concerted effort to reduce violence, improve community relations, and bring accountability. And it was incredibly effective. If I'm confirmed to lead the DEA, I believe that one of the great strengths of the DEA today is its partnerships with states and local law enforcement. They're a big part of running task forces across the country and also sit as an important part of HIDA. So I am deeply committed to addressing the issues of violent crime. Drugs drive violence in our communities. In Camden, it was a huge part of the work we did was drug-related. So you have my full commitment, if I'm confirmed, to partner with you, other members of this committee and Congress, as well as with the other agency heads in the Department of Justice in any way that I can to be helpful on this.
Thank you, Ms. Milgram. Mr. Polite.
Senator, thank you for this question, and thank you for your commitment to this area. I would also note that I'm a proud member of the Delaware Bar, and most importantly, my wife was born in Wilmington. So we have very close ties to your state. Like my colleagues assembled here, I share in this commitment to collaboration in this area. During my time as U.S. Attorney, this is exactly the way we approached many of the same violent crime issues that crippled the city of New Orleans. And what we did was establish what was called a multi-agency gang unit. It included agents from ATF, DEA, other state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies that worked shoulder to shoulder, not just in terms of sharing intelligence, but actual personnel in space where they investigated those cases and ultimately decided what was the appropriate venue in order to address violent crime that was caused disproportionately by a small number of individuals in the New Orleans area. That level of collaboration is what I view as being the hallmark of our work then, and I look forward to, if I'm confirmed, to lending my voice to those same discussions and that same level of collaboration that you articulated.
Well, thank you. I'm not just a member of this committee. I'm a member of the subcommittee that funds all of federal law enforcement, DOJ, ATF, DEA, and I look forward to working with you because we have a real challenge in this country. We need to strengthen our communities. We need to strengthen families. We need to push back on the drivers of violence and division. But we also need to provide more effective, more timely, more relevant federal resources to support state and local law enforcement and communities as they are trying to bring peace to our streets and justice to our country. So I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you for your willingness to serve. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time to question.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Thanks again to the nominees for your testimony, your willingness to serve. Before I adjourn today's hearing, I want to enter a number of letters into the record and make a few logistical notes. We have received a number of letters of support for today's nominees from those across the political, professional, and ideological spectrum. These include letters of support from Ms. Cunningham from intellectual property experts and practitioners, letters from multiple law enforcement organizations in support of our executive branch nominees, a letter of support from the Criminal Defense Bar in support of Ms. Strickland, and many others. I will enter all of those letters into the record without objection. Questions for the record will be due to the nominees by 5 p.m. on Wednesday, June 2nd, and the record will likewise remain open until that time to submit letters and similar materials. With that, this hearing is adjourned.